Hello, my name is Lily. My sister called me Lowly, then banned me from every family party like I was some kind of embarrassment she needed to erase. But the truth cuts deeper than that. She didn't just push me out of rooms. She quietly rewrote my place in our family, stole my ideas, poisoned my friendships, made sure I looked like the broken one while she wore the crown. I thought I was just imagining it. I thought maybe, if I tried harder, she would love me. But how do you fight back against a betrayal that's been hiding in plain sight your whole life? And when you finally see it, how do you survive it? The sun scorched down mercilessly on Nashville that afternoon, turning the asphalt into a shimmering black river and bouncing off the polished, gleaming cars lined up outside my parents' sprawling house. The Harpers had always known how to put on a show, and today was no exception. A casual backyard party to celebrate Jolie's hitting 1 million followers, but with rented valet staff, live music, and enough champagne to float a yacht. It was supposed to be a celebration, a family celebration, but for me, it felt like standing at the velvet rope outside a club where everyone else had the password and I was the punchline. I clutched my simple beige clutch tighter, feeling the stiff faux leather bite into my palm. With my other hand, I smoothed out invisible creases on my modest navy blue dress. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't expensive, but it was neat, respectable. I had debated for hours over it that morning, wondering if I should have bought something trendier, something louder, something that screamed, I belong here too. But no dress in the world could change the fact that, in Jolie's glittering, curated life, I was a blurry, unwanted extra in the background. I took a breath, steadying myself, and stepped onto the manicured stone pathway that led to the front entrance. The air buzzed with energy, men in crisp linen shirts and designer sunglasses, women whose laughter tinkled like glass wind chimes, waiters in black vests balancing champagne flutes on silver trays. Every inch of the front yard, from the artful flower arrangements to the perfectly positioned string lights, screamed money, taste, and exclusivity. As I approached the entrance, a tall security guard in a tailored black suit stood behind a glossy podium, checking names against a sleek clipboard. His mirrored sunglasses reflected back a distorted version of Mesmal, plain, forgettable. "Hi," I said, forcing my voice to be even, cheerful. "Lily Harper." He scanned the list, flipped a page, checked again. A slight frown creased his forehead before he looked up, his expression shifting into something carefully apologetic. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name isn't on the list." For a second, everything around me, the clinking glasses, the chirping birds, the low thrum of conversation blurred into a muffled haze. I blinked, feeling heat rush to my face. "There must be a mistake," I said, my laugh brittle. "I'm Jolie's sister." He shook his head with mechanical sympathy. "I'm sorry. If you're not on the list, I can't let you in." Behind me, a murmur began to ripple through the crowd. I caught a few snickers, the unmistakable pop of a phone camera capturing the moment. A hot, sick feeling bloomed in my stomach. Before I could protest further, the crowd parted like the Red Sea, and there she was, Jolie, floating towards us in a shimmering silver dress that probably cost more than my entire monthly rent. Her blonde hair was swept up into a loose, effortless bun. Her makeup looked airbrushed to perfection. She was radiant, untouchable, every bit the golden girl Nashville had fallen in love with. And she was smirking. "Well, well," she drawled loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, her southern lilt sweet and sharp as a knife. "If it isn't little Miss Lowly." The words slapped me harder than any physical blow. The collective intake of breath around us was almost theatrical. I saw faces turn, phones lift subtly. I was giving them a show, and they were eating it up. "She thinks just showing up means she belongs here," Jolie continued with a sing-song cruelty, linking her arm through the security guards with mock affection. Bless her heart. 3 small words, dripping with syrupy disdain. In the South, it was the polite way to say you were pitiful, irredeemable, pathetic. I could have crumbled, could have begged, defended myself, caused a scene. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not anymore. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat and smiled, not a big fake grin, but something small and steel-hard. "It's all right," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor building inside me. "It's your day, Jolie. Enjoy it. No fireworks, No tears, just those words, plain and unshakable. I turned on my heel and walked away, my flats tapping steadily against the stone path. With every step I took, the party noise, the laughter, the clinking glasses, the pop songs drifting from the backyard speakers, faded into a low, meaningless hum behind me. My heart hammered against my ribs, my palms were slick with sweat, but my mind had never felt sharper. This wasn't some misunderstanding, I realized, as I crossed the sidewalk to where I'd parked 2 blocks away to avoid the valet stand. This wasn't an oversight or a mistake. Jolie hadn't forgotten to add my name to the list. She had deliberately kept me out. This was a message, loud and clear. As I reached my car, the sun was dipping low, casting long, cool shadows across the pavement. I stood there for a moment, clutching my keys, breathing in the heavy, humid air. Something shifted inside me then. It wasn't anger exactly, though there was anger there, simmering low and deep. It wasn't sadness, though grief twined around my ribs, squeezing tight. It was something different, something clean, a resolve so pure it almost frightened me. This would be the last time Yoli or anyone else made me feel small, invisible, lesser. Not one more time. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. I wasn't going to dim myself to fit into someone else's shallow world. I slipped into my car, pulled the door shut, and sat for a moment, the engine silent, the key cold in my hand. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, I started the ignition. The engine roared to life, low and sure, just like the new rhythm beating inside my chest. I drove away without looking back. That night, sleep never found me. I tossed under the thin sheet, the Tennessee summer heat clinging to my skin as tightly as the shame from earlier clung to my heart. Hours blurred into one another until it was just me, my phone screen glowing in the darkness, and memories I had spent years trying to forget surfacing with cruel clarity. I scrolled through old photos, birthday parties, graduations, holidays, every image a carefully staged portrait of family bliss. But looking closer now, I noticed things I'd missed before. Jolie's tight smiles. Her eyes that never seemed to soften when looking at me. Subtle things, but undeniable. The next morning bled into the next day without much distinction. Coffee tasted like cardboard, and the walls of my apartment felt smaller, more suffocating. My inbox remained untouched, my mind too busy replaying every word Jolie had flung at me with that saccharine smile. By the second day, Serafina called. "Meet me at Grady's," she said simply, the urgency in her voice slicing through my days. Grady's was our usual, a small, tucked-away cafe that smelled like burnt caramel and warm bread, a place where the noise of the world dimmed just enough for truth to breathe. I slid into the booth across from her, noting how she fidgeted with her coffee sleeve. She was nervous, and Serafina was never nervous. She didn't waste time. "Lily," she said, voice low, "you need to know, Jolie's been running her mouth about you for years." My breath caught. "What are you talking about?" She looked around the cafe before leaning closer. "She's been planting stories, telling people you're unstable, unreliable, that you're basically a ticking time bomb." I blinked, the words slamming into me harder than Jolie's public humiliation ever could. Serafina's hands tightened around her cup. "She made you the scapegoat, Lily. Every time something went wrong, a missed deadline, a bad campaign, she hinted you were the weak link. And people believed her because, well, she said it with that sweet little bless-her-heart charm. There it was again. That weaponized southern sweetness Jolie wielded better than any sword. "And you're telling me this now?" I asked, my voice a little harsher than intended. Serafina's face crumpled in guilt. "I should have told you sooner. I didn't know how deep it went until recently." I sat back, heart pounding. Years. This wasn't some random betrayal. It was strategic, systematic, and the worst part, I hadn't even seen it happening. After a heavy silence, Serafina pushed her phone across the table. "Look at this." On the screen was a screenshot, an email chain between Jolie and a major marketing firm. Attached were social media proposals, ideas, strategies, concepts, all in my writing, all bearing my style. Only the name credited, Jolie. I stared, my throat closing. She stole my work. She stole my ideas and paraded them as her own to climb higher, to get richer, to build the perfect FOD while pushing me further into the background. A bitter laugh escaped me. Of course she did. Serafina looked ready to cry. I'm so sorry, Lily. But I wasn't looking for sympathy. Not anymore. I slid the phone back across the table. Thank you for showing me. Because now I knew. Now it was no longer just petty insults or cruel party games. It was calculated. It was theft. It was war. Later that night, I sat cross-legged on my bed, my laptop open but forgotten. The document I was supposed to be working on blinked blankly at me. Instead, I grabbed my journal, a leather-bound thing that had seen better days, and wrote one sentence across a fresh page. This ends now. I underlined it twice, pressing the pen so hard that it tore slightly into the paper. As I closed the journal, a strange calmness settled over me. Not the kind born of resignation, but the kind that comes when you finally understand the enemy you're dealing with. For the first time in years, I realized something essential. Forgiveness wasn't strength. It was fear wearing a halo, and I was done being afraid. The next few days crept by in a haze of muted rage. It wasn't the kind that demanded a screaming match or impulsive retaliation. It was the slow, boiling kind, the kind that hardened resolve like fire tempers steel. By the time Sunday rolled around, I felt like a live wire humming beneath the surface. That morning, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Family brunch, no excuses, starts at 11, bring a smile, as if a forced curve of the lips could patch over years of cracks. I almost didn't go. A big part of me wanted to delete the message and spend the day hiding under a blanket with a pint of cookie dough ice cream. But then I thought about Jolie's face at the party, the triumph in her eyes when she saw me turned away at the door. No, I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Not today. The Harper family home stood just as imposing as it had during the party, a gleaming testament to appearances and hollow victories. I pulled into the driveway, turned off the ignition, and took a long breath before stepping out into the heavy summer air. Inside, the familiar scent of lemon polish and cinnamon rolls wrapped around me, deceptively warm. The dining room buzzed with the clatter of silverware and hollow laughter. Jolie was already holding court at the head of the table, a queen in her perfect white dress, sipping mimosas like she ruled the world. Well, look who decided to join us, she chirped as I walked in, loud enough for everyone to hear. A few heads turned, a few polite smiles flickered and died. I ignored her and slid into a seat at the far end of the table. I busied myself with unfolding my napkin, pretending not to notice the glances darting my way like arrows. The meal was a minefield of small talk and thinly veiled jabs. I kept my head down, answering when addressed, forcing myself to swallow both the food and the rising bile. And then it happened. As the plates were being cleared and conversation lulled, Jolie leaned back in her chair, swirling her champagne lazily. You know, she said with a bright smile, it's just amazing how far social media has come. I mean, even assistants these days get to call themselves strategists. Isn't that something? Laughter rippled around the table, soft, uncertain, but real. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. The blood roared in my ears, but I kept my expression neutral. I wouldn't give her a show. Not here. Not yet. The brunch wrapped up with hugs and promises to get together more often, the kind everyone knew were lies the moment they were uttered. As I was pulling my keys from my purse, Serafina caught up to me outside. You got a minute? She asked, her voice low. We walked to the side of the house out of earshot. I wasn't going to say anything, she began, fidgeting with her necklace, but you deserve to know. I stiffened. Know what? She exhaled sharply. A while back, Jolie told some friends and I overheard it that you were her Plan B. I stared at her. Plan B? I repeated slowly, the words tasting like ash. Yeah, she said you were useful when needed, that if anything ever happened to her accounts or her deals, she'd just borrow your stuff until she got back on top. The world tilted for a second. It wasn't just casual cruelty anymore. It was calculated. It was survival hers, at the cost of my dignity. I swallowed hard. Thanks for telling me, I said, my voice cold and flat. Serafina reached out like she wanted to say more, but I shook my head and turned away. Some things didn't need more words. Driving home, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles bleached white. I pulled into my driveway and sat there, staring out at nothing, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. Inside my chest, something had snapped clean. No more pretending, no more hoping, no more giving people the benefit of the doubt when they showed me exactly who they were. They wanted war? Fine, I wouldn't start it, but I damn sure would finish it. The anger didn't fade. It sharpened into something quieter, heavier, a blade honed in the dark. I spent the next 2 weeks not screaming, not crying, but working. Every late night when the world was asleep, I sat at my dining table, laptop open, my fingers dancing over the keys with ruthless precision. One by one, I dismantled everything I had ever done to help Jolie deleted old posts where I'd quietly boosted her image, canceled auto-renewed marketing services she didn't even know I had set up for her, removed backlinks, shut down dummy accounts that had been used to amplify her brand. Each click was a small act of silent retaliation. Each deletion, a reclaiming of space she never deserved. She wouldn't notice right away, no. That wasn't how this worked. Like termites hollowing a house from the inside out, my absence would take time to show its damage. But it would come. The strange part was how calm I felt. No rush of triumph, no giddy satisfaction, just cold resolve. I wasn't out for revenge. I was taking back what was mine, my time, my energy, my name. 2 weeks later, I found myself at the Riverside Convention Center. The Chamber of Commerce was hosting a local business expo, nothing glamorous. But in Nashville's close-knit entrepreneurial circles, it mattered. I hadn't planned to attend until I heard Jolie would be one of the keynote speakers, invited to talk about her branding journey. I couldn't resist. I didn't want to sabotage her, not overtly, but I wanted to see it. See what she looked like without my silent scaffolding. I arrived early, badge clipped to my jacket, blending in among the modest crowd. Small businesses, handmade soaps, consulting firms, the heartbeat of real people working real dreams. I wandered the booths, sipping weak coffee and pretending not to be on edge. As I approached the registration table for the keynote session, I gave my name to the attendant. She smiled brightly, typed into her tablet, then frowned. "I'm sorry," she said, looking up. "I don't see your name on the list." My stomach dropped. There must be a mistake. I registered weeks ago. She double-checked, shook her head. "I'm really sorry." I stood there stunned, the low murmur of the crowd swallowing me. Then I caught a flicker of movement near the entrance. Jolie, standing with her manager, glancing my way for just a split second before turning back, a smirk playing on her lips. Of course, it was subtle, petty, exactly her style. I forced a smile at the attendant, thanked her anyway, and walked outside into the blinding sun. Standing on the sidewalk, watching the buzz of the event happening without me, it clicked. This wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. Jolie wasn't playing a twisted version of sibling rivalry. She was systematically trying to erase me. Every exclusion, every snide comment, every little sabotage, it was warfare, fought in the shadows of social grace. I leaned against a lamppost, letting the late afternoon heat seep into my bones. Around me, Nashville pulsed on, uncaring. For a long moment, I watched the river glint under the fading sun and let myself feel the weight of it all. Then I pulled out my phone and sent a simple text to Serafina. No more backing down. I tucked my phone back into my purse and straightened up. If Jolie wanted to make me invisible, she'd have to work a hell of a lot harder, because the next time she tried to crush me, I would be ready to hit back. The days that followed felt strangely calm, like the eerie stillness before a tornado rips through a town. I went back to my routine's work, gym, coffee with Serafina, but every move I made now carried a sharpened edge. I wasn't operating from hurt anymore. I was operating from strategy. One afternoon, Serafina and I sat cross-legged on my worn-out couch, the soft hum of the air conditioner struggling against the Tennessee heat. I mapped out everything: how to protect my reputation, how to rebuild my brand independently, how to move in circles Jolie couldn't contaminate. Serafina listened, nodding, tossing in advice where needed. For once, I felt like I had a battle plan, one that didn't require shouting matches or passive-aggressive family dinners. Just quiet, deliberate moves. But Jolie must have sensed the shift, even without seeing it directly, because she struck first. It started innocently enough. A few cryptic posts popped up on her Instagram stories, vague references to jealousy among family and how sad it is when someone you love wants to see you fail. Typical vague booking nonsense, but the message was clear enough for anyone who knew the situation. At first, I rolled my eyes and brushed it off. Let her talk, I thought. People see through that eventually. But then it escalated. Jolie posted a photo of us as kids, arms slung around each other, big grins captioned, "Some people outgrow their love for you when they realize they can't outshine you." The comments section exploded. Friends, family, acquaintances. They all chimed in, some subtle, some not, hinting that maybe I was the bitter one, the jealous little sister who couldn't handle another's success. Private messages trickled into my inbox too. "Are you okay?" Jolie seemed really hurt. "It's such a shame. Family should lift each other up, not tear each other down." Each message landed like a slap. It didn't matter that none of them knew the real story. Jolie had done what she always did best, controlled the narrative before I even opened my mouth. I sat at my kitchen table one night, staring at my phone in disbelief as another mutual friend posted a thinly veiled dig. True colors come out when the spotlight isn't on you. It was like watching a slow-moving train wreck where you were the one tied to the tracks. Serafina, ever the voice of reason, told me to stay calm. "They'll see the truth eventually," she said, pouring me another glass of wine. But I wasn't feeling patient anymore. I wasn't feeling passive. They could whisper behind screens all they wanted. I wasn't going to sit by and let them paint me into their villain. Late that night, I posted a single story on my private account, one that only close friends could see. No names, no accusations, just this. When lies stack high enough, they collapse under their own weight. No hashtags, no callouts, no drama. But I knew the people who needed to see it would, and judging by the sudden flurry of unfollows from a few so-called friends, I hit exactly where it hurt. It wasn't about dragging Jolie into the mud. It wasn't about public vengeance. It was about setting a line in the sand. If they wanted to believe her lies, that was their choice. I wasn't wasting another second trying to correct them. I was done explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. The next morning, I woke up to a different kind of silence, the heavy, suffocating kind that fills a room after the last punch has been thrown. My phone buzzed with one last text from someone I once considered a close friend. "I just can't be part of this drama anymore. I hope you find peace." I smiled grimly, tossed the phone onto the couch, and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. Peace? They thought cutting me off was a punishment. They didn't realize they were doing me a favor. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled my tiny kitchen, but I barely noticed as I scrolled through my phone, the headlines blaring back at me. Jolie Harper opens up about family betrayal. The article was littered with words like heartbreak, loyalty, and healing. Pictures of her looking tearful, perfectly posed, perfectly lit, adorned the page. She was playing the victim like she was born for the role. I set the phone down carefully, almost reverently, like it might burn my skin. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't remorseful. She was manipulating the narrative, again. Only this time, I wasn't the naive little sister hoping she'd come around. I was done waiting for miracles. Later that afternoon, Serafina met me at our usual coffee spot, a cozy, slightly run-down place tucked between a used bookstore and a yoga studio. She slid into the booth across from me, a laptop under one arm and a grim look on her face. "Ready to see the real show?" she asked, already pulling up her screen. I nodded, my stomach coiled tight with anticipation. Serafina clicked through screenshots, videos, and private voice messages Jolie had left on group chats, mocking me, plotting posts, staging her little redemption arc, all while pretending online that she was the wounded party. "Here's the best part," Serafina said, smirking grimly. She played a short clip, Jolie's voice unmistakably sneering, saying, "Give it a month. They'll forget she even exists. People are stupid like that." My chest tightened, a mixture of anger and cold-cutting clarity. It was all an act. Every teardrop, every heartfelt caption, every fake apology. By the end of the slideshow, my hands were steady, my heart pounding with a rhythm that no longer sounded like fear, it sounded like purpose. "Send it," I said simply. Serafina grinned. "Already did. Anonymous dropped to 3 major gossip blogs. Should hit by morning." We clinked our coffee mugs together, a quiet, deadly toast. The reckoning had officially begun. The next few days passed in a blur of righteous vindication. Screenshots circulated. Jolie's curated victim persona cracked under public scrutiny. People began piecing the truth together that the Golden Girl wasn't as pure as she liked to pretend. It wasn't just petty revenge. It was exposure. It was survival. But Serafina and I both knew Jolie wouldn't go down without a fight. "You need to prepare for her next move," Serafina warned one evening as we sat in my apartment, the city lights casting broken reflections across my living room floor. "She's going to get desperate." That's when she handed me a card, sleek, minimalistic. Laura Mitchell, attorney at law defamation and cyberbullying defense specialist. "She works pro bono for cases like yours," Serafina said. "She's good, real good. If Jolie tries anything legally shady, you'll be ready." I stared at the card, a foreign feeling blooming in my chest. Security. Not hope, not blind trust, something stronger. Preparation. I scheduled a meeting with Laura for the next afternoon. We talked through everything: the smear campaign, the stolen ideas, the public humiliation. Laura listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes with swift, efficient movements. By the time I left her office, clutching a folder of preliminary legal strategies, I felt taller, heavier, armored. Jolie had played her games in the shadows for years, knowing I had no defenses. Now I had a shield and a sword. That night, I sat on my bed, legs tucked beneath me, phone in hand. I thought about posting some grand declaration, some cathartic explosion of truth. But then I remembered, the strongest moves are often the quietest. I opened my private social media account, the one only trusted friends still followed, and posted one line, stark against a black background. "This isn't a fight, it's a reckoning." I didn't check the reactions. I didn't need to. I knew Jolie would see it. I knew she would understand exactly what it meant. The next morning, I woke up not to dread or fear, but to an almost electric stillness, like the charged air before a thunderstorm. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't scared. Jolie had made her move. Now it was my turn. I had thought the storm had passed. Turns out Jolie was just gathering her next wave. It started small, an ugly comment on an old post, a subtle dig buried in a thread I hadn't checked in weeks. At first I brushed it off. Trolls were nothing new on the internet. But by the end of the week, it wasn't just trolls. It was an avalanche. Dozens, then hundreds of fake accounts cropped up overnight. My inbox flooded with cruel messages, twisting every truth about me into something ugly. Accusations I'd never heard before echoed across platforms. Words like jealous, toxic, unstable clung to my name like smoke. I refreshed my screen, my heart hammering faster with every notification. Photos of me, poorly photoshopped into compromising situations. Quotes taken wildly out of context. DMs from strangers telling me I was disgusting or a disgrace to my family. Sitting in my living room, the Nashville evening light fading into shadow around me, I realized this wasn't random. This was organized. Jolie wasn't just fighting back, she was trying to obliterate me. Serafina came over the next morning, her laptop under her arm and a steely look in her eye. She wasted no time, sliding into my kitchen chair and flipping her computer open. "She hired them," Serafina said grimly. "Bot farms. Paid trolls. I traced some of the account creation patterns. It's textbook." I squeezed my coffee mug so tightly it creaked. "How do we prove it?" Serafina smiled, a sharp, dangerous curve of her mouth. "We don't have to. She's already sloppy." Over the next 2 days, Serafina dug deep. Screenshots piled up. IP addresses overlapped. Fake followers appeared by the thousands on Jolie's accounts. Too many, too fast, too obvious. The final blow came when a whistleblower, a freelance PR agent Jolie had stiffed on a payment, leaked emails to a local blog. Emails where Jolie discussed buying a few thousand fans to offset the negative press. It went viral within hours. The golden image she had crafted so carefully started to crack at the seams. Big lifestyle influencers unfollowed her. Brands quietly pulled collaborations. Even the local papers began running pieces with thinly veiled skepticism. When authenticity backfires, the perils of manufactured fame. Still, it wasn't enough. Not for me. Because in the middle of that chaotic week, another blow struck, but this one, Jolie didn't see coming. An old video resurfaced. Grainy footage taken at an event 3 years prior. Jolie screaming at a teenage volunteer who had spilled coffee on her shoes. The words were vicious, cruel, and entirely unprovoked. "You can't even carry a tray, right? God, no wonder you'll never be anything." The video spread like wildfire. Overnight, the narrative shifted. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the villain. I watched it unfold from my couch, legs tucked under me, a heavy blanket wrapped around my shoulders, even though the summer air was warm. The comments turned brutal, but not toward me, toward her. How could anyone treat a kid like that? Fake apologies mean nothing when this is the real you. Unfollowed, disgusted. It was a strange feeling, watching her house of lies burn down, not with a bang, but with a slow, relentless collapse. Part of me thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. I hadn't lifted a single match. Jolie had set herself ablaze. All I had done was hold up the mirror. Later that evening, Serafina and I sat at our usual caf, a quiet satisfaction buzzing between us. "You played it perfectly," she said, tapping her spoon against her coffee cup. She destroyed herself. I stared out the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. "Maybe," I said softly, "but it's not over yet. Because people like Jolie, they didn't vanish quietly. They clawed, they schemed. They found ways to rebrand their sins into sob stories if you gave them even half a chance. And I wasn't about to give her one. The fallout wasn't just messy, it was a landslide. By the time Monday morning rolled around, it seemed like the entire city of Nashville had a front row seat to Jolie's downfall. Headlines splashed across digital news feeds. Top influencer caught faking numbers. Toxic behavior exposed, former darling under fire. Brand deals terminated amid scandal. Emails flooded Jolie's inbox, not the flattering kind. First, it was the skincare brand that had once flown her to Miami for a glamorous launch party. Then, a fitness apparel company pulled out, citing a misalignment of core values. One by one, the dominoes fell. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching the pristine empire Jolie built collapse under its own lies was satisfaction enough. Sitting in my kitchen, a chipped coffee mug cradled between my palms, I scrolled through the headlines. Serafina perched on a stool nearby, tapping her nails against her phone, feeding me updates in real time. "She's hemorrhaging followers," she said, glancing up. "Big time." I nodded but didn't smile. It didn't feel like winning a prize. It felt like pulling myself out of quicksand. A new email pinged into my inbox. I glanced at it, expecting another news alert, but my breath caught. It was an invitation. A well-known podcast, one that specialized in real, raw conversations about toxic family dynamics, had reached out. They wanted me. They wanted to hear my side. I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't about taking cheap shots at Jolie. This was about truth, about giving voice to years of silence. Still, the thought of speaking publicly twisted my stomach into knots. Would they believe me? Would they think I was just another bitter sibling airing dirty laundry? I closed the laptop softly and leaned back in my chair, the ceiling fan humming above me. "I think you should do it," Serafina said, reading my silence like a book. "Not for revenge, for closure." I met her gaze and saw no judgment there, only quiet encouragement. The next day, I found myself sitting in a cozy recording studio, headphones resting lightly over my ears. The host, a woman named Mariah with kind eyes and a no-nonsense voice, smiled reassuringly from across the table. "When you're ready," she said, gesturing to the mic. I took a deep breath, and I spoke. I didn't name names. I didn't point fingers. I just told the truth, my truth, about growing up in the shadow of someone who measured love by usefulness, about being gaslit into doubting my worth, about learning that setting boundaries wasn't cruelty, it was survival. By the time the interview ended, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won, because I'd let go. Later that night, as I sat on my balcony sipping sweet tea under the early autumn stars, my phone buzzed with a string of new messages. Not the usual bile or pity. These were different. Old friends, former co-workers, names I hadn't seen pop up in years. "Hey, I'm sorry for not believing you back then. I have something you might want to see." I should have spoken up sooner. One by one, they came forward. Screenshots, text chains, voice memos, all documenting Jolie's long pattern of manipulation lies whispered behind my back. Sabotaged opportunities, cruel jokes made at my expense. Proof. Not that I needed it anymore to validate what I had lived through, but seeing it laid bare was its own kind of justice. I sat there, the cool breeze brushing against my skin, scrolling through years of betrayal now dragged into the light. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even feel particularly triumphant. I just felt free. It wasn't about destroying Jolie anymore. She had done that to herself. It was about finally refusing to carry the weight of her sins on my shoulders. I set my phone down on the table, leaned back in my chair, and let the silence stretch between the stars. For the first time in my adult life, it wasn't poisoned by regret or self-doubt. I hadn't burned bridges. I had simply stopped crossing them. Walking through the front doors of the podcast studio, I felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation settle over me. Peace. Not the brittle, defensive kind I used to armor myself with whenever Jolie's name came up, but something steadier, deeper, like finally stepping out of a storm and realizing the ground beneath you is still solid. The studio itself was unremarkable, just a few chairs, a table, some recording equipment, and a soft buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. But as I sat down, adjusted the microphone, and took a sip of water, it felt monumental. This wasn't about dragging Jolie through the mud. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my story, the one she had tried so hard to erase. Across from me, the podcast host, Mariah, smiled warmly. She had the kind of presence that made you feel like you could say anything, and it would be met with understanding, not judgment. "When you're ready, Lily," she said gently. I closed my eyes for half a second, drawing a steady breath into my lungs. Then I leaned forward and spoke. I didn't start with the betrayals or the screaming matches or the public humiliations. I started with the loneliness, the quiet ways a toxic family dynamic convinces you that you're the problem, that love is something you earn by being useful, obedient, small. I spoke about the years I spent minimizing myself, trying to fit into a shrinking space Jolie left for me. I shared the nights I cried in silence, the mornings I woke up determined to try harder, be better, only to be pushed aside again. I spoke about the breaking point, the party, the betrayal, the war I never asked for but refused to lose. Mariah didn't interrupt. She just nodded occasionally, her eyes encouraging me to continue, to dig deeper. By the time the recording ended, my throat was raw, but my heart felt light. Like I had been carrying a backpack full of stones for years without even realizing it, and now, finally, I could set it down. The next few days passed in a surreal blur. The episode aired on a Thursday morning. I didn't promote it. I didn't share it on my public platforms. I didn't even tell most of my friends. But somehow it found its way into the world. Messages began pouring in. Emails, DMs, letters, from strangers. From women who had been scapegoated by their families, from men who had been gaslighted into silence, from people who didn't have the words for their own pain until they heard mine. "Thank you for telling the story I was too afraid to tell. You made me feel less alone. Because of you, I'm setting boundaries for the first time in my life." Reading those messages was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't fame, it wasn't vanity, it was connection. Real, raw, human connection. Some local news outlets picked up the story. A few blogs ran think pieces about the podcast episode. There was even tentative talk about a panel discussion for National Mental Health Awareness Month. I hadn't set out to become anyone's symbol. But maybe that's how real healing works, not by climbing up on a pedestal, but by reaching down into the mud and helping someone else climb out too. Late one evening, after a long day responding to emails and sipping lukewarm coffee, I found myself sitting alone on my back porch. The night was crisp, the first real bite of fall nipping at the air. I pulled a blanket tighter around my shoulders and stared up at the stars, Those same stars that had once felt like silent witnesses to my suffering now felt like promises. Of what? I wasn't sure yet. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. Jolie was still out there somewhere, probably plotting a comeback, spinning her narrative, gathering whatever scraps of sympathy she could find. But she wasn't my problem anymore. She wasn't my shadow. She wasn't my burden. The scars she left behind, they remained. They always would. But they didn't ache the way they used to. They weren't open wounds anymore. They were reminders of battles fought and survived. Freedom, I realized, wasn't about pretending the fire never happened. It was about forging something stronger from its ashes. And I had. Not just survival, not just resilience, but power, quiet, steady, unshakable power. I smiled, a real one this time, and whispered into the night, "You don't own my story anymore." Maybe Jolie never would understand. Maybe the world wouldn't always get it either. But I did. And that was enough. Freedom isn't about forgetting what they did. It's about living in a world where they can no longer touch you. After everything I've lived through, one truth stands clear. Freedom isn't given, it's claimed, often at a cost. It took me years to learn that forgiveness doesn't mean staying silent while someone keeps hurting you. Keeping the peace at your own expense isn't noble, it's self-destruction. Walking away from toxic family isn't betrayal. It's survival. I spent too long shrinking myself, believing if I was quieter or easier to love, maybe they'd finally see my worth. But the hard truth? You don't earn your humanity, you were born deserving respect. No matter how loud the liars scream, or how many leave when you set boundaries, it doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're getting stronger. If you feel trapped by a family that treats you as disposable, hear this. You are not crazy, you are not broken, and you are not alone. You have the right to your voice, to peace, to a life that doesn't ask you to bleed to belong. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop crossing bridges that only ever led you to harm. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved because they couldn't love you back in a healthy way? What did it teach you about your strength? Drop a 1 inch in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. If you're fighting your own battle, your voice matters, let's talk. If you found a sliver of hope here, subscribe. We're building a space where real stories matter, where no one heals alone. Healing is messy, painful, and real, but it's worth it. Thanks for being here. You matter, always.
Please make sure the loan repayment is handled properly. While I was busy at work, an unexpected email popped up that changed my life. In a panic, I reached out to my husband, Brandon. When he finally answered, he calmly explained the shocking truth. "Oh, sorry, but I've fallen for someone else and decided to start a new life with her." My heart sank. To make matters worse, Brandon revealed that he was planning to take the luxury car we had recently purchased. The car, however, was in my name, and I had taken out a loan for it. Despite my efforts to convince him otherwise, Brandon ignored me, hung up abruptly, and cut off all communication. In the end, Brandon vanished with his new partner, leaving behind a massive debt for me to deal with. As a mother to our 8-year-old son, I could have never imagined being in such an unfair and painful situation. At 31 years old, I was completely lost, not knowing what to do. My mind went blank. My name is Brenda, and my husband Brandon is the same age. We were once a family of 4, including our smart and curious 8-year-old son, Jeremy. Jeremy has always been bright, reading articles online and even asking me for advice on complex topics from a young age. In contrast, Brandon had always been unstable. He could never keep a steady job. I was the one working full-time, worrying about our future, but somehow, Brandon had managed to maintain a stable income for the past 5 years. Recently, he had been talking about creating special memories as a family, which led us to the decision to buy a $75,000 camper van. However, since Brandon couldn't qualify for the loan due to his unstable credit, I had to take it out in my name. On the day we were eagerly waiting for the delivery of the camper van, everything fell apart. I received an email from Brandon out of the blue. In the message, he casually mentioned that he would be taking the camper van as the loan was in my name and I would be responsible for paying it off. Confused and heartbroken, I called him right away. What I heard next shattered me. Brandon confessed. I've fallen in love with another woman and decided to start dating her. At first, I thought it was just a fling, but it became serious. So, I've decided to start a new life with her. He didn't stop there. He brought up the divorce papers we had once talked about during an argument and told me he would go ahead and file them. Then, without warning, he hung up, leaving me in complete shock. This was the moment I realized my life had changed forever. I felt utterly betrayed by Brandon. His sudden departure hit me like a shocking blow, leaving me in disbelief. Despite my repeated attempts to contact him, through emails and calls, I received no response. Each time I tried, I hoped for even a shred of explanation, but it was like he had disappeared completely. When I came home from work one day, I checked the drawer where our divorce papers had been kept, and to my dismay, they were already gone. My heart sank further, knowing I was now left with the weight of a $75,000 car loan in my name, a debt I would have to face alone. The silence from Brandon was unbearable. Days passed, and there was still no word from him. Jeremy, my 8-year-old son, began to notice something was wrong. He could sense the shift in my behavior, even though I tried to mask my pain. After dinner one evening, he approached me with a concerned look on his face. "Mom, what's wrong? You haven't been eating much lately. Are you okay?" Caught off guard, I forced a smile. Yeah, maybe I'm just tired. Jeremy, ever observant, wasn't convinced. When people lie, they look up to the right. Lying is bad. I've noticed Dad hasn't been home for 5 days. Did something happen between you two? His sharp words startled me, and I realized I couldn't hide the truth any longer. Taking a deep breath to steady myself, I knew it was time to tell Jeremy what had happened. "Jeremy, your dad, he left us." Jeremy listened quietly as I explained everything, his expression calm, as if he had already expected it. "I see," he said after a moment. "It's just like Dad to do something like that. Aren't you sad?" I paused, unsure of how to answer. "Of course I'm sad, Jeremy," I said softly. "But I'll be okay. We'll be okay." Jeremy, surprisingly composed for his age, shrugged slightly. "I kind of understood from how things were going," he said, as though he had already come to terms with the situation. Though Jeremy appeared unconcerned on the surface, I knew deep down he must have felt the sadness too. I could see it in his eyes, the way they avoided mine, the way he tried to seem indifferent. As his mother, I could feel the weight he carried, and it broke my heart. Silently, I apologized to him in my mind, feeling powerless and overwhelmed. As the days went by, I struggled to cope with everything. My body, however, refused to cooperate. The emotional stress began to take its toll, and my health started to deteriorate. One day at work, there was a training session scheduled, but I couldn't bring myself to stand up. My legs felt weak, and I ended up crouching down, unable to go on. "I'm sorry. I can't stand up right now," I whispered to a nearby colleague, feeling dizzy and faint. "I need to take a break." The voices of my coworkers surrounded me, filled with concern, but I couldn't respond. My body gave in and I collapsed. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a hospital room, the sterile white walls and beeping machines reminding me that I had pushed myself too far. The doctor informed me that I needed more detailed examinations and that I had been admitted for stress-related exhaustion. Lying there, staring at the 4 drip in my arm and the white ceiling above, I couldn't help but feel pathetic. How had I let things get this bad? Tears began to flow down my cheeks, and I didn't bother wiping them away. I felt utterly defeated. At that moment, Jeremy rushed into the room, his usual calm demeanor replaced with panic. His worried face brought me back to reality, and I quickly wiped away my tears, not wanting him to see me like this. "Mom, what happened?" Jeremy asked, his voice trembling with fear. "Is it serious? You're not going to die, right?" I smiled weakly, reaching out to reassure him. "Of course not, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. I wouldn't leave my dear son alone." Jeremy let out a sigh of relief, his face softening a little. "That's good." "Really? I was called by the school and told you were taken to the hospital." I was so shocked, my heart nearly stopped. Seeing my son, so mature for his age, yet still just a child, made me realize how much I needed to fight for him. I needed to get better, not just for myself, but for him. But as much as I wanted to be strong, I couldn't deny that my condition was worse than I had let on. The road to recovery would be long, but with Jeremy by my side, I knew I had to find the strength to keep going. I was diagnosed with a serious illness, and the doctor didn't hesitate to share the urgency of the situation. "You should have surgery as soon as possible," the doctor said. "Please make a decision quickly." Faced with this unexpected news, I followed the doctor's advice and underwent surgery. By the time I was discharged from the hospital, a whole month had passed since Brandon had left. Although I was relieved that the surgery had gone well, my troubles were far from over. When I returned home, I opened the mailbox and found a demand letter for the car loan payment. My heart raced with panic. The payments were supposed to be automatically deducted from my account. Why hadn't they been paid? Without delay, I grabbed my cash card and rushed to check my account balance, hoping this was just a mistake. To my shock, the $55,000 I had saved was now reduced to just $55. My thoughts swirled in confusion and anger. Brandon did this, I thought to myself. He must have drained the account. I wanted so badly to contact him, to ask him to return the money. But I had no way to reach him. Brandon had disappeared, and I was left with nothing. I couldn't sell the camper van to recover any money because Brandon had taken it with him when he left. I felt completely trapped, as if everything in my life was falling apart. Since Brandon left, everything seemed to be going in a downward spiral. My mood sank lower and lower, feeling weighed down by this series of misfortunes. Seeing me so distressed, Jeremy came over and gently placed his hand on my forehead. "You look pale, Mom," he said with concern. "Are you feeling sick again? You don't seem to have a fever, though." I smiled weakly at him, appreciating his thoughtfulness. "I'm fine physically, Jeremy, but there's more. Your father didn't just take the camper van. He also took all the money we had saved. I'm in no condition to work right now, and without that money, I don't know how we're going to make it." My voice trembled as I spoke, and I felt completely lost. Jeremy listened quietly, his eyes wide with understanding. After a moment, he spoke. "I see. Well, I can help. I'll start delivering newspapers, or maybe search the internet for any jobs I can do." His words, spoken with such determination, filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in days. My 8-year-old son, so young yet so responsible, was offering to help in ways I had never expected. His encouragement lifted my spirits, and I realized I couldn't give in to despair. "Thank you, Jeremy," I said softly. "I'm sorry for worrying you. I can't afford to be weak. I'll change my mindset and try to do whatever I can. We'll figure this out." I smiled at him, and he smiled back, his face lighting up with hope. Then, to my surprise, Jeremy said something unexpected. "Let's plan how to get the camper van back from Dad." His suggestion caught me off guard. "How can we do that?" I asked, curious but doubtful. "Well, the camper van is in your name, right?" he said. "Yes, but what does that matter?" I responded, still unsure where he was going with this. Jeremy thought for a moment and then said, "Maybe we can do something about that. Also, I have an idea. Even though we don't know where Dad is right now, we can still track him down."
How?
I asked, intrigued. Jeremy reminded me of something I had forgotten. "Remember the GPS app we installed on my phone a while back when we went hiking as a family? We bought that kid's phone on a suggestion because I got lost. You and Dad both had access to the app, so you could see my location at all times. Well, I can still see where Dad is in real time." I stared at Jeremy, amazed by his thoughtfulness. "Is that really possible?" I asked. "Yeah, I've been checking it for a while. Dad's been moving around a lot, but we can definitely find him." My mind raced. It seemed like a solution was within reach, but doubts still lingered. But what if we find him, and he just says something vague again? What if he escapes, and I'm left with nothing? Jeremy looked up at me, calm but determined. "We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, Mom. But we can't just do nothing. We've got to at least try." His confidence gave me the strength to believe there was still hope, even in the midst of all this chaos. Though I was nervous, I felt a glimmer of determination return. With Jeremy by my side, I knew we had a chance to confront Brandon and maybe, just maybe, regain control over the mess he had left behind. I thought about what Jeremy said, and before I could respond, he smiled and made an intriguing suggestion. "Don't worry, Mom. I've already taken precautions." "What did you just say?" I asked, completely astonished. To my shock, while I was in the hospital, Jeremy had taken matters into his own hands and achieved something incredible. I couldn't believe it. How could such a smart, capable child have come from me? I was simply amazed by his resourcefulness and intelligence. It turned out Jeremy had even learned about Brandon's mistress. "All right," Jeremy said with determination. "Let's teach Dad a lesson for betraying us." I nodded, and together, we began to plan. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of hope and strength. With Jeremy by my side, I was filled with confidence. With you beside me, Jeremy, I feel invincible. Bring it on, Brandon, anywhere, anytime. 6 days later, my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and answered. "Hello. It's me. Please, I need your help." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by the voice on the other end. "Oh, and who might this be?" "Don't play dumb. It's your husband, obviously." Brandon sounded desperate. "I'm being questioned by the police about you. If this keeps up, they might ask me to come to the station voluntarily. Help me out." "Is that so?" I replied, my tone calm. "Just wait a moment then." I hung up and turned to Jeremy, telling him it was time. Together, we went to the location Brandon had mentioned. To my surprise, he was at a nearby forest park, a place where people often went camping. When we arrived, Brandon was standing by the camper van, looking confused and surrounded by police officers. Seeing him like that, I couldn't help but sigh. Brandon looked pathetic, standing there bewildered. I approached the officers and calmly asked them to give us a moment to talk as a family. They agreed, stepping back to give us some space. Brandon, clearly uncomfortable with the eyes of strangers on him, urged us to get into the camper van. Inside, I noticed Brandon's mistress sitting there, legs crossed, glaring at us. But honestly, I didn't care about her anymore. She was the least of my concerns. "Thanks for coming," Brandon muttered. "But why did the police suddenly show up here? I don't get it." "That's because I filed a report about the missing camper van," I explained, keeping my voice steady. Brandon's eyes widened in disbelief.
What?
"Why would you do that?" I shook my head. "Isn't it obvious? My car was stolen." Brandon stammered, clearly confused. "But I didn't steal it. We're married. Spouses can't steal from each other." I sighed deeply. "The world doesn't work that way, Brandon. You filed for divorce, remember? We're no longer a couple. You're driving someone else's car without permission, that's a crime." Brandon's face went pale. He seemed stunned, unable to process what was happening. "But I didn't steal it, I just borrowed it for a bit." "Well, I'd like to use my car now," I said firmly. "So, could you please return it?" I extended my hand, waiting for the keys. Reluctantly, Brandon reached into his pocket and handed the keys over. I took them, feeling a sense of satisfaction and relief. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. After confirming the van was returned to me, Jeremy, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice steady. "Why did you abandon your family and choose to play around with this woman?" Brandon was caught off guard by Jeremy's blunt question. He scratched his head awkwardly, clearly flustered. Before he could respond, Brandon's mistress chuckled smugly and chimed in. "It's because," she began, her voice dripping with arrogance, as if she was about to explain everything. But at that moment, I realized something important. It didn't matter what she had to say. I had won a small but meaningful victory, and with Jeremy by my side, I knew we could face whatever came next. "I'm more attractive than your mother. Can't you see it?" Emma said smugly, glaring at Jeremy. He fell head over heels for me and decided to leave his family. Jeremy, unimpressed, responded firmly, "Quiet. I didn't ask you, old lady. Dad, you answer." Emma fell silent, clearly taken aback by Jeremy's stern tone, but Brandon still remained quiet, avoiding eye contact. "If you can't explain yourself, that's fine," Jeremy continued, unbothered by the silence. "I'll just call the police back to have you arrested." "Wait, hold on." Okay, I'll talk," Brandon finally blurted out, clearly panicked. He glanced at Emma, and she shifted uncomfortably. Brandon then revealed the truth. Emma had joined his company 5 months ago. They were attracted to each other, and things started between them at a welcome party for new employees. Later, they found out that Emma was pregnant, and that's when Brandon made the decision to leave us behind and start a new life with her. "But why did you take the camper van?" Jeremy pressed, his tone calm but unyielding. Brandon sighed, looking guilty. "I quit my job and thought about selling the camper van for money, but I realized you guys were using it a lot. So, I figured it was better to go on a trip before selling it." "How do you know all of this?" Brandon asked, his voice full of confusion. "Remember when Jeremy got lost during our family hike?" I reminded him. "After that, we bought him a kid's cell phone and installed the GPS app for safety. You forgot that we installed the app on your phone too. So, I've known where you've been this entire time." Brandon's face fell as he realized the truth. Meanwhile, I turned to Jeremy and smiled, amazed at his cleverness. By the way, Jeremy later admitted he only pretended to get lost that day because he wanted the phone. Jeremy grinned slightly. "I suspected something was off with Dad, so I made a plan to monitor him." I was taken aback by how strategic my 8-year-old was. "You really are a smart kid," I said, shaking my head in disbelief. "But, Jeremy, I will never become someone like your dad, a man who betrays the people who love and trust him." Brandon, faced with Jeremy's blunt honesty, had no words. He looked pitiful, unable to come up with any defense. Seeing my son, only 8 years old, thinking clearly and speaking his mind so boldly, gave me renewed strength as a mother. I knew I had to stand firm, especially when it came to settling things the right way. "And now, Brandon," I said, turning to him, "return the $55,000 you withdrew from our account." "That was my money." Brandon crossed his arms, his voice turning defensive. "That was our joint property as a couple. I don't have to return it." "No, it wasn't," I shot back. "That money was what I had saved, little by little, since I was single. You've always quit your jobs halfway through, so we never saved money together." I was shocked and appalled that Brandon and his mistress had squandered the $55,000 I had worked so hard to save. In that moment, any lingering doubt I had about divorcing him vanished. I felt relieved to be free of someone so irresponsible. Brandon, realizing he had no excuse, sighed deeply. "So, what now?" he asked, defeated. "Well," I said calmly, "if you stole and used the camper van and my money, that's a serious crime. But I just sent the police away. So, it's not their business anymore, right?" Brandon said, his voice trembling. "I told the police we would talk," I replied. "I never said I would withdraw the complaint." Brandon's face went pale as the gravity of the situation set in. I could see he finally understood that his actions had consequences, and there was no escaping them this time. With Jeremy by my side, I felt strong. We had come through so much, but now it was time to move forward and put Brandon and everything he had taken from us behind. I should add the theft of my money to the police report, I thought aloud. "Mom, should I call the police now?" Jeremy asked, his finger hovering over the button on his phone, ready to make the call with a single press. Brandon's mistress, Emma, had been silently watching our conversation from inside the camper van. But as soon as Jeremy mentioned the police, she tried to bolt out of the van. Just as she reached the door, she let out a loud scream that echoed through the park. Standing right outside the van were her parents, faces red with anger, looking like they were about to explode. Startled, Emma froze and stumbled back inside, her face pale. "I'm sorry. Don't be so mad." "But why are you here, Mom and Dad?" she stammered. Jeremy smiled calmly. "I called your parents beforehand." Emma's eyes widened. "You did what?" The truth was, during my stay in the hospital, Jeremy had taken matters into his own hands. He visited Brandon's old office and in tears told them, My dad left our home with a woman and my mom collapsed. Seeing Jeremy's sorrow and desperation, the people at the office suspected it might have been Emma. They confirmed it when they gave Jeremy her parents' address after mentioning that Brandon and Emma had been unusually close at work. There were even pictures of them looking like a couple at the company's welcome party for new employees. It turned out Emma was commuting from her parents' house. Jeremy took the address and paid her parents a visit, explaining everything that had happened. That's how they ended up here, waiting outside to confront their daughter. "How could you do this to me?" Emma screamed at Jeremy. "You're the worst." "I don't want to hear that from you," Jeremy replied coldly. "By the way, your stomach seems quite big. When's the baby due?" "In 5 months," Emma muttered, looking away. "Wait a minute," I said, suspicious. "That doesn't add up. You two only met 2 months ago. How is that possible?" Brandon, hearing this for the first time, turned to Emma, his eyes wide in shock. "Wait, what? What's going on, Emma? You don't get it?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "It takes about 6 months for a baby to be born, Brandon. The child she's carrying isn't yours." Brandon's face went pale as he realized what I was saying. "Emma, is that true? Have you been lying to me all along?" Emma, seeing no way out, snapped. "Ugh, I almost got away with it. But now that I'm caught, I can't hide it anymore." "You're so naive, Brandon. You believed every lie. What a fool." Brandon's shock quickly turned to anger. "Don't mock me. You've ruined my entire life," he shouted. "What were you thinking, Emma?" An ugly argument erupted between them, their voices getting louder and more heated. But no one stepped in to stop them. We all stood back and let them hash it out. While they argued, Jeremy and I calmly contacted the police again to explain the situation. As the sun began to set, the peaceful forest park was lit up by the flashing red and blue lights of police cars, signaling the end of Brandon and Emma's twisted plans. It was clear now that there was no turning back for either of them. "I was wrong, I'm sorry. Truly, I am," Brandon pleaded, his voice shaking. "I'll work hard and never cheat again. Just please, don't let them arrest me." Jeremy, standing tall beside me, didn't flinch. "Dad, people don't change that easily, especially people like you who have always been lazy." I nodded in agreement. "Jeremy's right. I can't trust you anymore. You need to face the consequences and pay for your crimes at the police station." Brandon panicked, his eyes darting around. "But if I get arrested, I won't be able to pay back the money. Is that really okay with you?" I stayed calm and firm. "I don't mind. Pay me back after you've atoned for what you've done. Take your time. And don't worry, I've already found you a job to help with that. You'll work to repay the $55,000 you stole from me, plus Jeremy's child support." Brandon's face fell, knowing there was no way out. I could see the realization sinking in. He had to take responsibility. Turning to Emma, the mistress, I added, "And don't think you're just an innocent bystander. You're an accomplice in Brandon's theft, so be prepared to face the consequences as well." Emma's face paled. When I mentioned that she would be responsible for paying back the stolen money if Brandon couldn't, she started shaking with fear. Desperate, she turned to her parents for help, but they refused to get involved. "We disown a daughter who causes trouble for others," her parents said coldly. With nowhere left to turn, Brandon and Emma were taken away in the police car together, looking defeated. Thanks to Jeremy's clever planning, we had finally managed to bring them to justice. Although they were released from detention shortly after, they now faced hefty payments to make up for what they had done. Through my lawyer, I filed a claim for $55,000 in damages, and Brandon also agreed to pay $1,500 a month in child support for Jeremy. To ensure he followed through, I introduced Brandon to a subcontracting factory where he could work. His wages would be directly deducted each month, paying off what he owed me and helping to support Jeremy. On top of that, I sold the camper van and freed myself from the burden of the auto loan. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I could finally breathe again. Since then, my health has improved dramatically. I feel more energetic and focused on my job. Jeremy has stepped up, helping around the house and running errands. He's growing up so fast, and I want to be the best mother I can be for him. Moving forward, I'm determined to stay strong, Not just for myself, but for Jeremy. I want to create a life where he can pursue his dreams without any limitations. Together, we're building a future where we can thrive, leaving Brandon and all the hurt behind us for good. I'm Erica, and I've always loved love stories where the guy sweeps the girl off her feet. So, when Chris came along with his sweet morning texts and nightly calls asking about my day, I fell for him quickly. Looking back, it's almost funny how fast I thought, this is it. This is love. My friends would see us together and say we were perfect for each other, like we were made to be.
But then there was Grandma Marianne.
She was full of wisdom and had seen so much in her life. She used to say, Erica, honey, watch the signs. When a man wants all your time, it's not always love. Sometimes it's control. I'd laugh it off, thinking her ideas were old-fashioned. Chris was different, or so I thought. One evening, like so many others, we were sitting on my old couch. He held my hand a little too tightly and asked, "Did you meet anyone interesting at work today?" I told him about the usual people and skipped the boring details. It's the same folks every day.
You know that, I said.
He pressed on. And no one knew? No one caught your eye? His tone sounded casual, but his grip wasn't. Why so curious? I asked, trying to joke and gently pulling my hand away. Just making sure we're good, he said, smiling, though his eyes didn't match the smile. We sat there, the TV murmuring in the background, but the mood had shifted. It wasn't the first time I'd felt this quiet pressure, but I always brushed it aside. Grandma Marianne's words came back to me, and my chest tightened. She had warned me about moments like this, but I hadn't really listened. As the night dragged on, my thoughts were far away, caught up in her warnings and the uneasy feeling in my stomach that wouldn't go away. When Chris left, he took more than himself out the door. He took a piece of my peace with him, leaving me standing there, locking the door behind him. I leaned back and let out a deep breath. The apartment was quiet now, but the doubts in my mind seemed louder in the silence he left behind. I thought about calling Grandma Marianne, but it was late, and I knew this was my mess to figure out. As I stared at the microwave clock blinking in time with my uneasy thoughts, it hit me. There's a thin line between love and being trapped. I had ignored the warnings, thinking the red flags were roses. Chris and I had said I do and started our married life in my little ivy-covered house. At first, it seemed perfect, but after we settled in, things started to change. One evening, we were sitting on the porch. The air smelled of pine trees, and Chris held my hand a little too tightly. "Who's that new guy working with you?" he asked suddenly. "Oh, that's just Jeremy. He's in marketing," I said, trying to keep my tone light. Chris didn't say much, just hummed, but I saw the tension in his jaw. I knew that look, it meant he thought something was off. Over time, Chris's questions stopped feeling like questions. They were more like interrogations. He was always trying to find something. Then it wasn't just questions, he started on my clothes. One Friday morning, I was picking out a dress for brunch with friends. "That one's nice," he said, pointing to a plain dress. I was thinking of wearing the blue one. "It's more cheerful," I said, holding on my favorite dress. It was the one that made my eyes sparkle a little more. He shook his head. "You'd stand out too much."
"Wear the other one," he said.
It wasn't a suggestion. "But Chris, it's just a dress," I said, trying to keep the peace. "Trust me, Erica. I'm looking out for you," he replied. But it didn't feel like he was looking out for me.
It felt like he was controlling me.
It didn't stop there. His preferences spilled into everything: my wardrobe, my social life. Dinners with friends became rare, my phone stopped buzzing, and eventually the invitations stopped altogether. One evening, Chris plopped down on the couch beside me, looking annoyed. "Owen called. Wants us to meet them for drinks next Thursday," he said, grabbing the remote. "Oh, that sounds nice," I said, surprised. "Told him we're busy," Chris replied, cutting me off. "We are?" I asked, confused. I hadn't seen Owen and Chelsea in weeks. They were our couple friends, the ones we used to hang out with all the time. Chris flipped through the TV channels, not looking at me. "We don't need to spend so much time with them." You've got me, and I've got you. That's enough, isn't it? He said. I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. I wanted to argue, to remind him that we were our own people, but I felt too tired to fight. Deep down, I knew it wouldn't change anything. That's enough, I said quietly, but it felt like I was trying to convince myself. This was my life now. What I wore and who I spent time with had become things Chris decided. And every time I let it slide, he'd take a little more. I didn't realize how much I'd lost until I found an old photo of myself laughing with friends. I stared at it and wondered where that version of me had gone. Life isn't neat and simple, it's messy, especially when love becomes something that traps you instead of setting you free. That's how it felt with Chris lately. Our love felt like walls closing in, disguised as normal married life. His new habit was showing up at my office without warning, acting like he owned the place, and me, too. Just in the neighborhood, he'd say with an overly cheerful smile. One evening, I decided I'd wear my favorite pencil skirt to work the next day. Chris walked in, his face twisted with anger. I knew what was coming.
Why do you need to wear that? He snapped.
It's just a skirt, Chris, I said, trying to stay calm.
I didn't want another fight.
It's not just a skirt. Who are you dressing for, Huss? His voice was sharp, full of suspicion. I dress for myself. Since when is that a problem? I shot back, trying to stand my ground. But even to me, I sounded unsure. The next morning, when I went to get dressed, my skirt and half my wardrobe was gone. Panic hit me like a wave, making my head spin. I found Chris in the kitchen, calmly making coffee like nothing had happened. Where are my clothes, Chris? I asked, my voice shaking. I demanded answers, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and anger. I sounded like a stranger, not a wife. They weren't appropriate. I did us both a favor, Chris said, his tone oddly calm, as if he were talking about the weather instead of my clothes. A favor? By deciding what I can and can't wear? Do you hear yourself? I asked, my disbelief clear in my voice. It's for the best, Erica. You'll thank me later, he said, like he knew better than me. His words made my skin crawl. That's when I realized what was happening. This wasn't concern, it was control. My independence, my choices. He was chipping away at them bit by bit, trying to mold me into someone smaller, someone easier to control. I sat at the kitchen table, his words echoing in the silence. My home, once warm and loving, felt different now. It wasn't a safe place anymore. It was a beautifully decorated prison, and Chris was the warden. The rest of the day was a blur. At work, I went through the motions, smiling when I had to, but inside, I felt like a storm was brewing. I spent hours staring at the pictures on my phone, family photos where Chris looked like the perfect husband. Now they felt like someone else's life, like I didn't recognize the woman in them. That evening, I sat in my car outside the house, the engine humming softly. I didn't want to go inside. It took all my strength to turn the key and step through the door. The smell of dinner hit me, and there was Chris, smiling and kissing me like it was just another day. But it wasn't. And the saddest part? I didn't know if tomorrow would be any different. At work the next day, my boss, Mr. Andrew, dropped a thick file on my desk. Got a new project for you, Erica. It'll mean some late nights, but you're the best for the job. Of course, Mr. Andrew. Happy to help, I said, forcing a smile, even though my stomach sank at the thought. That night at dinner, I told Chris about the project. His fork clattered against his plate as his eyes narrowed. You'll quit, he said, his voice sharp and cold. Chris, quitting isn't that simple, I replied, trying to stay calm. I'm good at my job, and we need the money. I tried to reason with him, hoping he'd understand, but his fists clenched on the table, and his anger was clear as day. No wife of mine is going to slave away for some boss, he almost shouted. That's when his mother, Kate, showed up like always, right on cue, her hands trembling with worry. Erica, honey, she said, her hands fluttering nervously. Can't you just ease up a bit for Chris? It wasn't right. None of it. But I had loved him once, and part of me still held on to that. So I tried to meet him halfway. What if I work from home? Best of both worlds, right? I offered. Chris leaned back in his chair, his face relaxing just a little. Fine, he muttered, but he added, no late nights. Kate smiled, her pale eyes meeting mine like she was silently thanking me. But inside, I felt trapped. The walls around me were painted by Chris's anger and framed by Kate's constant worry. As weeks went by, my home office became my whole world. Chris would occasionally peek over my shoulder, and Kate would call in the afternoons to check in, or maybe check up on me. It was hard to tell. Either way, I felt like I was on a short leash. Work kept me busy enough to push the darker thoughts away. My boss, Mr. Andrew, was tough but fair. You're holding everything together, Erica, he said during one of our phone calls. Keep it up. One evening, as the sun set and turned the sky a tired shade of blue, Chris was on the couch, flipping through channels but not really watching. I closed my laptop, my brain fried from a long day of work. Work's done for now, I said, my voice worn out. He grunted, a sound that wasn't a yes or a no, just Chris's way of saying he heard me. I sat down next to him, the cushion sinking under me like my tired bones. Out of nowhere, he said, you've been talking to Andrew a lot about work. Yes, it's work, Chris, I said, keeping my eyes on the TV, trying to avoid an argument. He hummed, a sound I knew too well. It was that familiar signal that his mind was working probably on something I wouldn't like. That was life with Chris. My love for him felt like a blindfold getting tighter. Every step forward felt like 3 steps back. The woman I saw in the mirror was starting to feel like a stranger. Her eyes were full of questions I was too scared to answer. One day, I needed a ride, and Grandma's place was too far to walk. I took a taxi home, just a regular ride with a regular driver. He dropped me off, and that should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Chris was outside waiting for me, and as soon as he saw me step out of the taxi, he lost it. The driver had barely handed me my change when Chris stormed over. What's going on here? Who's this? He snapped, his eyes wide with anger. Chill out, Chris. He's just a taxi driver, I said, trying to calm him down, but Chris wouldn't listen. The driver, seeing trouble, didn't waste a second. He jumped back in his car and drove off. Smart move. Once we were inside, Chris was still pacing, throwing angry looks my way. Really, Chris? You're freaking out over nothing, I said, exhausted by the drama. It's not nothing. Who knows what you were doing in there? He shouted, his voice booming in the small entryway. I rolled my eyes. Get over yourself. Things eventually settled down, but it didn't last. A couple of days later, while I was making dinner, I caught Chris snooping through my phone. Hey, what do you think you're doing? I snapped, grabbing my phone out of his hands. He trailed off, looking guilty, like a kid caught stealing cookies. Do you mind telling me what's so interesting about my phone? I asked, completely fed up. Chris rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. I don't know. I was just checking on you. Making sure you're not hiding anything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Checking on me? Are you serious right now? You think that's okay? For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he sighed. I'm sorry, all right? I won't do it again. You're right, you won't, because this is ridiculous. You're acting crazy, I said, my patience wearing thin. Look, Chris said, his voice softer now. I messed up. Forgive me, okay? I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. I was mad, sure, but not mad enough to end everything. Not yet. Fine, I said, but this is it, Chris. No more acting like a jealous kid. You need to get it together. He nodded quickly, almost too eager. Yeah, of course. I promise. I let it go, hoping things would get better. Deep down, I knew it was a long shot, but I still wanted to believe. Sometimes that's what we do. We see the warning signs but keep ignoring them, hoping the road will somehow lead somewhere else. It all started one cool morning when I noticed a car. It was a plain, dark sedan, parked on the next street over. It looked a little too clean and stayed a little too long, but I shrugged it off. Probably just visiting someone, I thought. But then I saw it again at the grocery store, parked a couple of aisles over. And again, near the dry cleaners. Same car, same feeling. It was like a bad penny that kept showing up. After a week of this, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was off. One day, when the car followed me to the library, I decided to test it. I took a different route home, turning here and there to see if it would follow.
It did.
The sedan matched my turns, keeping its distance but always there. When I parked on a side street, it stopped just a little way behind me. This wasn't a coincidence. It's strange how your mind doesn't want to believe something's wrong, even when it's obvious. It felt ridiculous, like something out of a cheap detective show, but my heart was racing. Fear and anger bubbled up inside me. I grabbed my phone and whispered, "I think I'm being followed," as if the guy in the car could hear me. The police took me seriously. They arrived quickly, talked to the man in the car, checked his ID, and then confirmed my fears. The guy was a private detective, hired to follow me. By the time I got home, I was shaking. The police report was clutched in my hand as I walked through the door. Chris was lounging on the couch like it was any other night, looking completely unaware that his little game had been exposed. "Chris," I shouted, throwing the door open harder than I meant to. "What the hell is this?" He jumped up, startled, his eyes darting around like they always did when he was caught off guard. "Erica, a private detective, Chris?" I said, my voice trembling. "You had me followed?" He started stammering, his face red and guilty. "Don't," I said, cutting him off and holding up my hand. "Just don't." I didn't want to hear any excuses or lies. "You know what? I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice shaking. But I pulled myself together. "You need to leave, Chris." His mouth opened like he was going to argue, but then he stopped. Without another word, he grabbed his coat and walked out. For the first time in years, I was alone. But instead of feeling scared, I felt relief. It was the first honest moment I'd had in a long time. That day started off strange. The house was quieter now that Chris was gone. He was many things, but quiet wasn't one of them. The peace was nice, but it also felt a little eerie. Then there was a knock at the door, shattering the silence like a dropped plate. Standing there was Mr. John, Chris's boss. He was medium height, always looked stiff, like he starched his face along with his shirts. I never liked him much. Today, he was holding a folder stuffed with papers. "He's not here," I said before he could come inside. Mr. John frowned, probably not used to people not opening their doors wide for him. "I've got some important work documents for him." I sighed. If Chris got $1 every time he was called important, we'd be living in a mansion. Well, he's not here. I can give them to him when he comes back. Mr. John thought for a moment, then nodded. "I suppose. Can I come in for a moment? I've been driving for hours." I noticed his car parked outside. It was as fancy and polished as his suit, shiny black and spotless. "Sure, why not?" I said, stepping aside. I waved toward the kitchen. "Take a seat. Want some tea?" He plopped down in the chair like a sack of flour, looking tired, maybe from the drive, maybe from life. Hard to tell. "Tea would be good." "Thank you, Erica." I put the kettle on and scooped tea leaves into the pot. Old habits die hard. I used to like being the perfect hostess. That's when I saw it through the kitchen window. Flames. Fire was dancing around Mr. John's car like it was celebrating something. I shoved the half-made tea toward Mr. John. "Your car," I said, rushing outside. We bolted out the door, and there he was, Chris, my estranged husband, standing by the burning car with a grin that made my stomach turn. He looked like it was his birthday, and someone had brought him a surprise cake. His eyes glinted with the same craziness as the flames. Mr. John froze, then blurted out, "My car? What the hell is going on?" Chris turned to us, his smile twitching. "Hey, Erica. This is for stealing my life. Say hello to your lover." His words slurred with some twisted satisfaction, mixed with pure insanity. He actually thought he was getting revenge on some imaginary lover of mine. Mr. John stood there, his face shifting from shock to rage. "Chris, did you do this?" Chris's grin disappeared as fast as ice cream on a hot day when he realized who Mr. John was. His boss.
His mistake.
"Boss, I didn't know," Chris stammered. Mr. John cut him off. "You set my car on fire thinking it belonged to who?" "God, Chris." I had the contract renewal papers with me. Well, guess what? Consider them, and your job, ashes. You're done. Chris dropped to his knees like a sack of bricks, pleading. Please, Mr. John, Save it, Mr. John said coldly. I'm calling the police. The sirens didn't take long. The street filled up quickly. Neighbors, cops, and even some people holding up their phones, recording like we were some cheap reality shows. The cops slapped cuffs on Chris's wrists while he was still on his knees, his pants dusty from the driveway. I felt a weight lift off me as they hauled him away. One fire's out, but I knew I still had a mess to clean up. Mr. John just shook his head at what used to be his shiny black car, now reduced to a smoldering wreck. The last I saw of Chris, he was trying to look back at me over his shoulder, his eyes wide with panic. When I stepped back into my living room, everything felt strange. The whole ordeal with Chris was finally ending. The divorce papers had been filed, and I told him to stay away, but he clearly didn't listen. Now, with jail time on the horizon for burning his boss's car and stalking me, it was over. Mr. John wasn't letting it slide, either. He fired Chris and hit him with a lawsuit. Standing there, I couldn't help but feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. Erica, honey? Grandma Marianne called from the kitchen. Do you need anything? I took a deep breath.
No, Grandma.
I'm good. I shook my head as I walked into the kitchen to see Grandma Marianne. She had a way of cutting straight through the nonsense. Gran, I'm good, I said, pausing. But I should have listened to you about Chris. She turned around from the sink, drying her hands on a dish towel. Oh, honey, when will you learn to trust this? She said, patting her belly with a little chuckle. I couldn't help but laugh. She always kept it real. Can't argue with Grandma's gut, I said with a smile. Later, I sat on the couch, flipping through a magazine without really reading it. It was just something to do. For the first time in months, I felt sure I'd made the right decision. There was still a lot to handle, lawyers, sorting out the mess Chris left, figuring out money, but tonight it was just me. I pulled out my phone and texted Olivia, my best friend since forever.
Free.
Finally. Want to come over and crash my solo party? It didn't take long for her to reply. On my way. Bringing pizza. The rest of the night was going to be simple, no drama, no Chris. Just pizza, bad TV shows, and good company. I changed into my comfiest sweatpants and pulled my hair back, finally able to breathe. The future wasn't totally clear yet, but it already looked a lot better than my past. I smiled to myself, thinking how nice it felt to have no strings attached. No more walking on eggshells. This was how life was going to be from now on, starting now. I locked the door behind me, feeling the new locks click into place. Freedom tasted a lot like pepperoni and cheese tonight, and that was just fine by me. I often think about how my life might have been different if my parents hadn't divorced when I was 7. Back then, I was just Patricia Heaton, a regular kid living with my mom and dad in a cozy house they had bought together. Those early years were filled with simple happiness, family dinners, trips to the park on weekends, and bedtime stories from both my parents. Everything changed when they split up. Dad moved out but left us the house and made sure we were financially stable. He paid enough alimony that Mom didn't need to work, and she seemed fine with that. About a year later, Mom met Timothy. At first, he seemed nice. He'd bring candy when he visited and tried to make me laugh. They got married quickly, and soon after, my half-sister Ashley was born. That's when things began to shift. Timothy started giving me strange looks, like I didn't belong. He made little comments when Mom wasn't around, like, "Don't you miss your dad?" or "Wouldn't you rather live with him?" When I was 13, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. "I got that promotion at work," Timothy said quietly but firmly. "My salary's nearly doubled. You won't need to work or rely on Patricia's child support." "But that money helps," Mom replied. "It pays for a lot." "Come on, Nancy," Timothy insisted. "We both know Patricia would be better off with her dad. Plus, wouldn't it be nice to just focus on our family, on Ashley's?" The way Mom didn't even hesitate before agreeing is something I'll never forget.
"You're right," she said.
"I'll call Gregory tomorrow about taking Patricia." I stood in the hallway, frozen, my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The glass of water I'd gone to get was forgotten as I tried to process what I had just heard. My own mother was willing to send me away because she didn't need Dad's money anymore. Looking back now, I wonder if they ever realized how much that moment hurt me. I heard that conversation. Mom acted like she was doing me a favor when she told me I'd be moving in with Dad. "You'll have more opportunities there," she said, as if she wasn't just getting rid of me because I was no longer convenient. Dad welcomed me with open arms. He didn't ask any questions, just made me feel at home. He had set up a room for me in his apartment, painted it my favorite color, and filled the bookshelf with all the books I loved. That first night, he sat on the edge of my bed and said, "I'm sorry things turned out this way, kiddo, but I want you to know something. You'll always have a home with me. Always." Those words became my rock in the years that followed. While Mom was busy with her new family and barely called except for holidays, Dad was there for everything. He showed up for school plays, parent-teacher conferences, and even comforted me when I had my first heartbreak. He made sure I got into a good private school, encouraged my hobbies, and never made me feel like a burden. When it was time to apply for college, he helped me every night, reading essays and researching schools with me. I'll never forget the day my Princeton acceptance letter arrived. Dad's eyes filled with tears as he read it. "You did it, kiddo," he said, pulling me into a hug. "I always knew you would." College was expensive, but Dad never complained. "Your education is my priority," he'd say whenever I worried about the cost. Those 5 years flew by, and before I knew it, I graduated with honors and landed a job at a top consulting firm. I got a nice apartment downtown, not far from Dad's place. Every Monday, we had dinner together like we had since I was 13. We talked about my work, my projects, or just sat in comfortable silence watching old movies, like we used to when I was in high school. Everything felt perfect, until it wasn't. The diagnosis came out of nowhere. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 7 months, the doctor said, trying to sound hopeful. But Dad only made it 4. I was 29 when I lost him. Those last weeks were brutal. I took time off work to stay with Dad in the hospital. One night, near the end, he held my hand tightly and said, "You are the best thing in my life, Patricia. Never forget that." After he passed, I found out he had left everything to me, his beautiful apartment in the city and $800,000 in his accounts. But I couldn't think about the money. I just missed him so much. About a month after the funeral, my phone rang. I almost dropped it when I saw Mom's name on the screen. I hadn't heard from her in years. "Patricia," she said, her voice unsure, "I heard about your father." "I'm so sorry." "Thanks," I said quietly. There was a pause before she continued. "Timothy passed away recently too. Heart attack." She hesitated again. "I've been thinking about you a lot. Maybe it was the grief, or maybe I wanted to believe people could change, but I agreed to meet her for coffee. That one coffee turned into regular visits. I met Ashley properly for the first time since she was a baby. She was 22 now, struggling to find direction, bouncing between job interviews. Mom was working as a cashier at a local supermarket, nothing like the life she had when she didn't need to work. I started visiting them more often, sometimes a few times a month. I'd tell them about my life, my weekend trips to different states, vacations in Europe, and I always brought them gifts. Designer clothes for Ashley, nice perfumes for Mom, little luxuries they couldn't afford. It felt good to share my success with them. Eventually, it became a habit. I couldn't visit Mom's place without bringing something. Even if it was just a quick stop for coffee, I felt guilty if I showed up empty-handed. The mall became my regular stop before any visit. Ashley especially loved the clothes I brought back from Europe. Her face would light up every time I pulled something out of my suitcase.
"Oh my God, Jess."
"Is this really from that boutique in Bremen?" she'd squeal, holding up whatever designer piece I'd found for her. At first, I loved their reactions. Maybe I was trying to buy the affection I never got as a kid. I spent time picking out things I thought they'd love, a cashmere sweater for Mom, a leather handbag for Ashley. One day, I decided to ask what they actually wanted. "Oh, I couldn't possibly," Mom said, looking down at her coffee cup. "Maybe just some new towels from Target." Ashley was hesitant too. maybe some drugstore makeup? But things changed after that. Their requests started getting bigger and more frequent. Mom went from asking for towels to texting me full shopping lists. One text said, "Hey honey, when you're in Bern next month, could you pick up that Gucci bag we saw online? And Ashley really needs new winter clothes. Prada would be nice. Oh, and we're running low on groceries." I stared at my phone, my stomach turning. The lists kept coming, growing longer and more demanding. It wasn't just luxury items anymore. They started expecting me to pay for their basic expenses too. One evening, after getting yet another long list, I decided I'd had enough. I drove to their house, determined to talk things through. "Mom, Ashley, we need to talk about these requests," I said, sitting at their kitchen table. Mom shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "What do you mean, sweeties?" "The lists. The constant asking for things. It's getting out of hand," I explained. "Oh, come on," Ashley said, rolling her eyes. "It's not like you can't afford it. You're loaded." "That's not the point," I said, trying to stay calm. "Yes, I have money, but..." "But what?" Ashley interrupted. "You're just going to hoard it all while your family struggles? You've got that fancy apartment, you're always traveling, and you can't help your poor family? You're rich. Dad left you all that money, and you're being selfish." I felt my face get hot. "Selfish," I said. "That money came from the parent who actually wanted me. The one who didn't give me up when I became inconvenient." The room went silent. "It's my money," I said, standing up. "And I'll decide how to spend it." "Real nice, Jess," Ashley snapped. "Real nice way to treat your family." I walked out, slamming the door behind me. For the next month, my phone stayed silent. No calls, no texts, no lists of demands. Part of me felt hurt, but another part of me felt relieved. Then, after a month of silence, my phone rang. It was Mom. "Patricia, honey, could you come over?" she asked. "I need to talk to you about something important." There was something in Mom's voice that made me worry. Despite our recent argument, I found myself driving to her house that afternoon. When I arrived, Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, looking quieter than usual. Ashley stood nearby, her face serious, a rare sight. "What's going on?" I asked, sitting down. Mom reached across the table and held my hand. "I've been to see a doctor, Patricia. It's my knee. They say I need surgery right away, a total knee replacement." My stomach dropped. "How serious is it?" "Very," she said, her voice shaky. "The doctor says if I don't get it done soon, I could end up disabled. I wouldn't be able to work anymore." I thought of Dad and how fast his health had declined after his diagnosis. I remembered how helpless I'd felt watching him suffer. "The thing is," Mom continued, "the best specialist for this surgery is in Oklahoma. They have a spot open, but..." She paused, glancing at Ashley, who stayed silent. "The whole thing, surgery, hospital stay, rehabilitation, is going to cost $80,000. $70,000? I repeated, my voice rising in surprise. "I know it's a lot," Mom said quickly. "But Ashley will come with me to help during recovery. The whole treatment and rehab will take about a month." I sat there, overwhelmed. Memories of Dad's last months flooded back. Hospital hallways, machines beeping, the helpless feeling of not being able to stop his pain. I couldn't let something like that happen again. Not if I could do something about it. "I'll help," I said, almost without thinking. "But I can't give you the full amount at once. I can do half now, $40,000, and the rest when I get the hospital bill." Mom's face darkened. "But I need all of it up front." "The hospital?" "Mom," I interrupted gently, "that's all I can do right now. I need to be smart about this." She started to argue, but Ashley put a hand on her shoulder, stopping her. They exchanged a glance I couldn't quite figure out. Then Mom's tone softened. "Actually," she said, "let me call the hospital. Maybe I can arrange to pay in 3 installments." She left the room with her phone, and I could hear her talking in the hallway. A few minutes later, she returned, looking relieved. "They said it would be fine," she announced. "We can pay half now and half after the surgery." The next few days were a blur of preparations. I transferred the first $40,000 to Mom's account. A week later, I helped them pack their bags and drove them to the airport. Mom and Ashley were off to Oklahoma for her surgery, or so I thought. A few days after they left, I was sitting in my home office reviewing some documents when my phone buzzed. The name that popped up made me smile. Shirley Sisha, my best friend since elementary school. We'd known each other since we were 6, but after I moved in with Dad, we mostly stayed in touch through social media. Lately, we've been meeting for coffee and catching up. "Hey, Ratch, what's up?" I answered. "Jess," Shirley's voice sounded off. "I need to ask you something weird. Did you know your mom and sister are in Europe?" I laughed, thinking it had to be a joke.
What?
"No, they're in Oklahoma. Mom's having knee surgery." "Yeah, that's what I thought too," Shirley said, pausing. "But my sister showed me these photos Ashley sent her. They're definitely not in Oklahoma." My phone buzzed with incoming messages. As each photo loaded, my stomach twisted. It felt like someone had punched me. There was Mom, looking perfectly fine, posing in front of the Trevi fountain. Ashley, taking selfies outside designer boutiques in Zurich. My Aunt Olivia and her daughter Helen lounging by a private pool at what looked like an expensive villa. Each photo was time-stamped with yesterday's date. "There's more," Shirley said hesitantly. "My sister said Ashley's been bragging about it. Apparently, your mom bought one-way tickets for herself, Ashley, your Aunt Olivia, and your cousin Helen. They rented some luxury villa for a month and have been shopping at high-end stores and eating at fancy restaurants." I stared at a photo of Mom, my supposedly surgery-bound mother, sipping wine at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Italian countryside. The $40,000 I'd given her for medical expenses was being blown on a European vacation. That night, I barely slept. I tossed and turned, scrolling through those photos over and over. How could they do this? How could they lie so easily, taking advantage of my concern for Mom's health? They had used my memories of Dad's illness to manipulate me into giving them money. The next morning, I called Mom. My hands shook so much, I could barely hold the phone. "How did the surgery go?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound calm. "Oh, it went great," Mom said cheerfully. "The doctor said everything went perfectly. I'm already starting rehabilitation," Mom said casually. I gripped the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles turned white. The way she lied so easily made me feel sick. "That's wonderful," I replied, my voice dripping with barely concealed anger. "I'd love to talk to your doctor about the procedure. Could you put him on?" There was a slight pause. "Oh, he's very busy right now, sweetie. Besides, there's no need to bother him. Look, I need to go. They're calling me for physical therapy." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, a flood of memories hitting me. Mom giving me away at 13 because she didn't need Dad's money anymore. Mom only reaching out after Dad died and left me his estate. Mom sending me shopping lists, expecting me to fund her lifestyle. And now this, the ultimate betrayal. I decided to play along with her lies, calling her every day to check on her recovery. Each time, she had a new excuse ready. "The doctor's in surgery right now, honey. He's at a conference today. He's seeing other patients. He's off duty until tomorrow." It was like watching a bad play where the actor keeps forgetting their lines and making things up on the spot. I even started keeping a list of her excuses, partly out of anger, partly because I couldn't believe how ridiculous they were getting. During one call, I said, "Mom, maybe we could do a video chat. I just want to see how you're doing and make sure you're comfortable in the hospital." I heard a rustling sound, probably her covering the phone while she checked with Ashley on what to say next. "Oh, sweetie, I look terrible right now, so swollen and bruised. Plus, the hospital Wi-Fi is awful. It keeps cutting out." As she spoke, I faintly heard Italian pop music in the background. "Really?" I pressed. "That's strange for a top medical facility." "Well, you know how these things are," she said quickly. "Listen, I need to go. Time for my physical therapy." The next time I called, I tried a different approach. "Mom, just send me the hospital bill directly. I'll wire the remaining $40,000 to their account." "No," she blurted out, too quickly, too forcefully. Then she softened her tone. "I mean, that's not necessary. Just send it to my account, and I'll handle everything with the hospital. They know me here. After that conversation, I knew something had to change. I stopped calling them, deciding to let them sweat a little. Sure enough, about a week later, Mom's number popped up on my phone. I watched it ring, imagining her panic as she realized the money might not be coming after all. Then came the text. Patricia, the hospital is demanding payment immediately. They're threatening to send the bill to collections. Please, we need the money right away. I took my time responding, waiting several hours before typing back. No problem. Just forward me the bill from the hospital, and I'll take care of it immediately. Silence.
4 days of it.
I knew they were scrambling, trying to figure out their next move. Finally, an email appeared in my inbox with the subject line, Urgent, hospital bill attached. I opened the attachment and almost laughed out loud. They hadn't even tried to make it believable. The letterhead was blurry, obviously copied from another document. The date on the bill was from 7 months ago. The hospital's address wasn't even in Oklahoma. It was in Florida. And the payment details? They listed Mom's personal bank account. I stared at their sad attempt at forgery, feeling both amused and deeply disappointed. I grabbed a stack of $200 bills I'd withdrawn earlier that week, fanning them out on my desk, and took a picture. Got your bill, I wrote back, attaching the photo. Sending you money. My finger hovered over the send button for a moment before I pressed it. Game on, Mom, I thought. Let's see what story you come up with next. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. Patricia? Mom's voice was high-pitched and panicked. What's going on? Where's the rest of the money? We've been waiting. Drop the act, Mom, I said coldly. I know exactly where you are, and it's not in any hospital. What are you talking about? She stammered.
You're in Switzerland, I said.
Staying at a villa, shopping at designer stores, and eating at expensive restaurants with Ashley and Olivia and Helen. The line went silent. I could almost hear her mind racing, trying to come up with a way to explain. How did you? She started. Ashley sent photos to Shirley's sister, who showed them to Shirley, who sent them to me, I said. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? I've seen everything, the villa, the shopping trips, all of it. You used Dad's death and my grief over not being able to save him to scam me out of money for a vacation. There was another pause, and then her tone changed. The fake concern was gone, replaced by defensive anger.
Fine.
Yes, we're in Switzerland, she snapped. I knew you'd never give us money for a vacation. But why shouldn't we get to travel too? You're always going somewhere, Bremen, Liverpool, California. Meanwhile, Ashley and I can barely afford groceries. That's not fair. Not fair. My voice shook as I tried to keep my anger in check. Not fair is being 13 years old and hearing your mother trade you away because she didn't need your father's money anymore. Not fair is having that same mother show up 17 years later, not because she misses you, but because your father died and left you money. We can talk about all that later, she said quickly, trying to redirect the conversation. Right now, we have a serious problem. We don't have money for tickets home, and we still need to pay for the villa rental. Everyone needs to get back to work. We can't lose our jobs. Please, Patricia, we need that other $40,000. In that moment, everything became clear.
She hadn't changed.
She was still the same woman who had given me away when I became inconvenient. Only now, she didn't want me. She wanted my money. That's your problem, not mine, I said flatly. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up and immediately blocked her number. Then I went through every social media account, messaging app, and any other way they could contact me, and blocked them all. Mom, Ashley, and Olivia, everyone who had been part of the scheme. Sitting alone in my apartment, the one Dad had left me, I felt something shift inside. The last bit of hope I'd held on to, that my mother might actually care about me, finally faded. She didn't want a relationship with me. She wanted my money. 3 weeks later, my phone rang.
It was my grandmother.
I almost didn't answer, but Grandma had always been different from Mom.
She was honest, genuine.
Patricia, honey, she said, her voice worried.
Your mother called me.
She says she needs $220,000 urgently. I don't have that kind of money, but I thought maybe you could. Grandma, I said gently, let me tell you what really happened. I told Grandma everything, the fake surgery, the Italian vacation, the scam to get my money. As I went on, I could hear her sighs getting heavier with each detail. Oh, Patricia, she said when I finished. I'm so sorry. I had no idea Nancy would do something like this. Don't worry about them, Grandma, I said, trying to reassure her. They got themselves into this mess. They can get themselves out. It didn't take long to find out how they were managing. A few days later, Shirley called me. Have you seen what Ashley's doing on social media? She asked.
I haven't, I replied.
I blocked them everywhere. Shirley filled me in. She's running a fundraiser, claiming her wealthy sister abandoned them in Switzerland with no money to get home. She's making you out to be this heartless rich person who left her poor family stranded in a foreign country. I felt a familiar surge of anger, but this time it was mixed with amusement. How's that working out for them?
I asked.
Well, Shirley said, they spent almost 3 weeks trying to raise money. They had to sell all the designer clothes and bags they bought. The villa owner was threatening to call the police because they couldn't pay the rent. And get this, they nearly lost their jobs because they stayed way longer than their approved vacation time. I shook my head, thinking about how their grand European adventure had completely backfired. A month later, Grandma called again with another update. They're finally back, she said. But, Patricia, it's a mess. Your Aunt Olivia isn't speaking to your mother anymore. Apparently, Nancy demanded Olivia help pay for the trip after everything fell apart. And Nancy and I had a terrible fight too, because I couldn't give her money for tickets home. She actually accused me of choosing you over her. I'm sorry you got dragged into this, Grandma, I said. Don't be, sweetheart. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of their actions. After we hung up, I walked to the window of my apartment, Dad's apartment, and looked out over the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. On my desk, a stack of travel brochures waited. I was planning my next trip, this time to Albania. The old me might have felt guilty about traveling while Mom and Ashley struggled. The old me might have invited them along, hoping once again to build the relationship I'd always wanted with them. But that version of me was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who finally understood that some relationships aren't worth saving. Dad's last words to me in the hospital echoed in my mind. You are the best thing in my life, Patricia. Never forget that. I hadn't forgotten. And now I finally understood. I'd been lucky to have had one parent who truly loved me, who put me first, and who taught me to know my own worth. Mom and Ashley could keep their lies and manipulations. I had my father's love, his legacy, and most importantly, my self-respect. These days, my life is peaceful. I travel when I want, work hard at my job, and spend time with friends who value me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. Sometimes Grandma tells me bits of news about Mom and Ashley. They're still struggling, still acting like victims, still looking for their next target. But their drama doesn't affect me anymore. I remember the day Leah was born. I was 6 years old, and Mom and Dad told me I was going to be a big sister. They said it would be amazing and that I'd have a best friend for life. What they didn't tell me was that I'd also feel invisible. My name is Mia, and growing up in the Mitchell household meant learning early on that there was a clear order of importance. Leah was at the top, and I was somewhere below, even the family dog. It wasn't subtle either. Every morning, Mom would make Leah's breakfast exactly how she liked it, 2 sunny-side-up eggs and toast cut diagonally, just right for her princess. Meanwhile, I'd get handed a box of cereal. This kind of thing happened all the time. When I needed braces, Dad grumbled about the cost for months. 3 years later, Leah needed them, and suddenly money wasn't an issue. They even got her the fancy clear ones I had wanted but couldn't have. Whenever I tried to speak up, my concerns were brushed aside, but when Leah got an A in math, the whole family went out to celebrate at her favorite restaurant. Birthdays were no different. Mine were simple backyard get-togethers with a store-bought cake and a few friends. Leah's, on the other hand, were over-the-top events with bounce houses, professional entertainers, and custom-made cakes. I once overheard Mom tell her friend, Leah just appreciates these things more. Mia is practical. The worst part was how Leah changed over time. She started out sweet. We used to build blanket forts and make up silly stories together. But after years of being treated like she could do no wrong, she turned into exactly what you'd expect. By middle school, Leah would waltz into my room and demand things. Mia, where's my blue sweater? She'd ask, digging through my closet without permission. That's mine, Leah, I'd say. Mom bought it for my birthday. But Leah would just call for Mom, who'd inevitably tell me, Mia, don't be selfish. Let your sister borrow it. I learned to pick my battles, lower my expectations, and find comfort elsewhere. School became my safe space. While Leah was getting endless praise for saying 2 lines in a school play, I focused on what really mattered to me. I was winning science fairs, acing advanced classes, and quietly working on my plan to get out. When I got my acceptance letter to State University with a full scholarship, I thought just maybe my parents would finally be proud of me. But at dinner that night, the focus was all on Leah. She went on and on about her 7th grade student council election. I tried to share my news during a rare pause. Mom, I got a full scholarship, I said. That's nice, honey. Leah, sweetie, tell us more about your campaign posters, Mom replied. When I started college, I only came home for major holidays, and even then, I couldn't wait to leave. Every visit was the same. Leah's accomplishments were celebrated, while my dean's list honors and internship offers barely got a nod. I learned to keep my trips short, and my expectations even shorter. Once finals ended, I'd rush back to my dorm, where my achievements felt like my own and weren't compared to my younger sister's average ones. During my junior year, I got a message on Facebook that changed everything. Hey, remember me? Olivier Richter's from Harvard High? I was a senior when you were a freshman. Of course, I remembered him, the cute guy from the debate team, who never noticed me back then. We started chatting every day, sharing college stories and high school memories. He was back in our hometown working as an engineer, and something just clicked between us. After I graduated, I moved back home for a job as a project manager at Turner and Associates. Olivier and I met for coffee during my first week back, and that coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into dating, and soon we were looking for an apartment together. The only downside was my parents' continued indifference. They barely noticed my new job or relationship because they were too busy worrying about Leah. She's having such a hard time adjusting to college, Mom would say during our rare phone calls. Not everyone can just breeze through college like you did. Thankfully, Olivier's family made up for it. His parents, Nick and Miriam, treated me like the daughter they never had, and his sister, Kate, became the kind of sister I had always wished Leah could be. They came over for dinner weekly, helped us furnish our apartment, and actually cared about my career. We're so proud of you both, Miriam told us at our small wedding 3 years later. The wedding was simple, held in Olivier's parents' backyard with just close friends and family. My parents came, but they spent most of the reception talking about Leah's summer internship. Despite that, life felt perfect. I was doing great at work, happily married, and finally part of a family that cared about me. A couple of years after the wedding, I got pregnant, and I thought life couldn't get any better. When our son Tony was born healthy and beautiful, it felt like everything was perfect. Olivier seemed like a loving father, and I thought we had it all. But things started to change after Tony turned 1. Olivier grew distant, worked late more often, and canceled our date nights. I told myself it was just the stress of being new parents, but deep down I knew something was wrong. One evening, while I was feeding Tony in his high chair, Olivier walked in looking exhausted. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice shaking. I've met someone else. Her name is Corinne. She's a client at work, and I'm in love with her. The divorce happened quickly and, surprisingly, without much conflict. Olivier moved to Kansas with Corinne but promised to take care of Tony and me financially. I may be a terrible husband, he told me during our last meeting, but I won't be a terrible father. After signing the divorce papers, I sat in my lawyer's office holding Tony close. At just 3 years old, he was too young to understand why Daddy wasn't coming home anymore. Olivier's family became my lifeline after the divorce. Despite everything that had happened, Nick and Miriam stayed devoted grandparents to Tony, and Kate became the kind of aunt every kid dream of. Tony would light up every time we visited their house, running straight to the toy corner they had set up just for him. Nick would get down on the floor to play trucks with him, and Kate always had some fun new craft or game ready. Visiting my own parents, though, was completely different. I tried to take Tony there sometimes, hoping they'd want to bond with their only grandchild, but their indifference was heartbreaking. "Mia, don't let him touch that vase," Mom would snap, barely looking up from her magazine. "And make sure he doesn't run around too much. He'll scratch the floors." Tony would cling to my leg, clearly sensing how cold the atmosphere was. It was even worse when Leah showed up during those visits. "There's my successful girl," Dad would beam as Leah walked in, going on about her new job at some trading company. They would hang on her every word, completely ignoring Tony, even when he tried to show them his latest drawing. The difference between how Olivier's family treated us and how my parents acted was hard to ignore. Over time, I visited my parents less and less. Instead, I focused on the people who truly cared about Tony and me. I focused on what I could control, my career, and building a stable, loving home for Tony. With Kate and her parents helping with childcare, I started taking on bigger challenges at work. When my boss warned me about the Canadian account, saying, "It's high risk. No one's closed this deal in 4 years," I didn't hesitate. "I can do it," I said confidently. And I did. After 4 months of late nights, video calls across time zones, and carefully crafted proposals, I not only closed the deal but expanded it to double its original size. That success opened the door to even more big projects, and each one built my reputation. Soon, I was the go-to person for the toughest clients. When I landed the Microsoft account, my team toasted to Mia Mitchell, the miracle worker. The promotion to senior account director came soon after, along with a corner office and a salary that left me speechless. The bonus from that deal was the final piece I needed. That weekend, Tony and I went house hunting. The realtor showed us a beautiful 3-bedroom apartment. "This one has a park nearby, and the school district is excellent," she said. Tony ran from room to room, thrilled about having his own space for his toys. As I watched him explore, I pulled up the calculator app on my phone to check the mortgage numbers one last time.
"We'll take it," I said.
That night, as I tucked Tony into bed in our old apartment for one of the last times, he asked, "Mommy, are we really getting a new home?" "With my own room." "With your own room," I told him, "a special art corner and space for all your books." He hugged me tightly. "You're the best mommy ever." In that moment, I realized something important. While I couldn't change my past or my parents' behavior, I could break the cycle. My son would never feel less than or second best. Things shifted quickly after news of my promotion and new apartment got out. One morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Sweetie, we haven't seen you and Tony in ages. Why don't you come over this weekend?" I almost dropped my coffee. This was the same woman who'd barely acknowledged me for the last 6 years. I thought about Tony, who still asked about his grandparents sometimes. Maybe people really can change. So, the next weekend, I took Tony to their house. The difference was shocking. "There's my favorite grandson," Dad called out as we walked in. Considering Tony was their only grandson, it wasn't saying much, but still. "Look what Grandma got you," Mom said, holding out a new toy truck, something she'd never done before. "And I made cookies. You like chocolate chip, right?" Tony, too young to remember how distant they had been before, was thrilled. I stood there watching as my mom actually got down on the floor to play with him, something I'd never seen her do in my entire life. Later, while Tony was busy with his new truck, Mom turned to me. "Mia, honey, we'd love to have him over more often. Maybe some weekends? You must need a break sometimes." It felt surreal, but I decided to go with it. What was that saying about not looking a gift horse in the mouth? Over the next few months, my parents surprisingly became involved grandparents. They started asking to have Tony stay over on weekends. I used that time to catch up with Kate, who noticed the change. "You seem happier," Kate said during one of our shopping trips. "More relaxed." "It's nice to see them finally making an effort," I admitted. But as time went on, I started to see why. The truth became clearer when the requests began rolling in, small things at first. Mom needed help with the plumbing bill. Dad's watch needed repairs. They were easy to cover with my new salary, so I agreed each time, remembering how they had paid for Leah's dance lessons and summer camps while denying me those opportunities. In a strange way, it felt good to be the one they were leaning on now. Then I heard about Leah. Her job at the trading company wasn't going as planned. She had been passed over for several promotions. "It's just office politics," Mom said defensively during one of our family dinners. "They don't recognize talent there." As Leah's struggles became more obvious, the money requests from my parents grew bigger. First, they needed a new refrigerator. Then home repairs. And then came the big one. "Sweetheart," Dad said one Thursday while Tony napped upstairs, "we've been thinking about getting a new car. The payments would be a bit steep for us, but with your new position," he named a figure that would have made me gasp a year ago. But now, it was manageable. "We'll pay you back," Mom promised, though we both knew they wouldn't. I agreed anyway. Maybe I was buying their validation, or maybe I just wanted to prove something to myself. Either way, I said yes. I started sending them a check every month to cover the car payments. "Just be careful," Kate told me over coffee the next day. "Money can make things messy." I nodded, but inside I thought, how messy could it get? I had more than enough, and if it meant Tony could have grandparents in his life, wasn't it worth it? It was just a normal Saturday at work. I was in the middle of a client presentation when a sharp, sudden pain hit me, making me double over in my chair. "Call an ambulance," I heard someone say. "She's white as a sheet." After that, everything was a blur, people rushing around, voices overlapping. The paramedics arrived quickly and helped me onto a stretcher. "Classic appendicitis symptoms," one of them said. "We need to get her to Memorial right away." Through the haze of pain, only one thought stood out clearly. Tony. He needed to be picked up from school in 3 hours. At the hospital, the diagnosis was confirmed almost immediately. "Your appendix needs to come out," the doctor said. "We'll operate soon, but you'll need to stay for at least 3 days afterward." "I need to make a call first," I said, trying to stay calm. My hands shook as the nurse handed me my phone. I dialed Mom's number. She picked up on the 5th ring. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm in the hospital. It's my appendix. They need to operate right away. Can you please pick up Tony from school? I need someone to watch him for a couple of days while I recover." There was a pause, then Mom said, "Oh, honey, that's not possible. Your father and I are getting ready for Leah's promotion party. She finally made junior executive at her company." The pain in my stomach was nothing compared to the one in my chest. "Mom, please," I said, my voice cracking. "I need help. Tony needs to be picked up in less than 3 hours." "Well, that's really not our problem," she replied, her tone suddenly cold. "We're in a hurry to get to the restaurant. There will be 80 people there. We can't be babysitting." "Babysitting? He's your grandson," I said, feeling both anger and disbelief. "Look, Mia," she sighed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. "Tony is your responsibility. He's always so noisy and touching everything. Honestly, it's quite a burden." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A burden? After everything I've done for you? I've been paying your car loan for the past year. Every time you needed money." She cut me off with a laugh that sent a chill through me. "Oh, we won't be needing your handouts anymore. Leah's new position comes with an excellent salary. She's going to help us now, instead of you." Then the line went dead. I lay in the hospital bed, phone still pressed to my ear, tears mixing with the sweat on my face. All those months of helping them, all the money I gave, all the weekends I spent pretending we were a happy family, and this was how it ended. The moment someone better came along, Tony and I were nothing more than an inconvenience. The nurse gently touched my arm. "Miss Mitchell, we need to prep you for surgery now." I nodded, already pulling up Kate's number. She picked up on the first ring. "Kate," my voice cracked. "I'm in the hospital. Appendicitis. They're prepping me for surgery. Could you please pick up Tony from school?" "I hate to ask." "Text me the school details," she interrupted right away. "What time does he need to be picked up?" 3:15, Kate. I'm so sorry to impose. Stop it, she said firmly. Tony is my nephew. Of course, I'll get him. We'll have a sleepover at my place, won't we? He loves playing with Sam. Anyway, I could hear her grabbing her keys in the background. Thank you, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Call your parents later, she said. Focus on getting better. Tony will be fine with me, I promise. The next thing I remembered was waking up in recovery, groggy from the anesthesia. My first thought was about Tony, but there was already a text from Kate waiting for me. Tony is having a blast. We made pizza and built a blanket fort. Don't worry about anything except getting well. She sent photos over the next 3 days. Tony playing with her dog, Sam, helping her bake cookies, and falling asleep surrounded by stuffed animals. Each picture made my heart ache with gratitude. When I was finally discharged, Kate drove me to her house. Tony ran to me the moment I walked in, but stopped just short when he remembered. Mommy, are you still ouchies? I'm okay, buddy, I said, pulling him into a gentle hug. Aunt Kate let me help make breakfast every morning, and Sam slept in my blanket fort, he said proudly. Kate helped us get home, stocked my fridge, and promised to check in daily. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of recovery. Kate brought over meals and kept Tony entertained when I needed to rest. One evening, as Tony cuddled next to me during bedtime stories, I was scrolling through social media. That's when I saw them. Dozens of photos from Leah's promotion party. They were all posted on the same day I'd been in surgery. I was in the hospital, while Mom and Dad stood proudly beside Leah in her fancy dress, smiling for photos. There were champagne toasts, a big cake, and everyone laughing and celebrating. Meanwhile, I lay in a hospital bed, and Tony, their grandson, was brushed off as a burden. That night, after Tony fell asleep, I sat at my computer. The first thing I did was cancel the automatic monthly payment I had been sending for their car. Then, I blocked them on every social media platform. I looked at the framed photo on my desk, Tony and me at the park, both laughing as Kate's dog Sam chased Bubbles. Something shifted inside me. For years, I had been trying to buy my parents' love with money and patience. But real family? Real family picks you up from the hospital. Real family builds blanket forts with your child. Real family shows up. For months passed, and life settled into a calm, happy rhythm. Kate and her parents became a big part of our lives, filling our weekends with barbecues, park outings, and movie nights. Then, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. Mom's number flashed on the screen. I stared at it for a moment, my finger hovering over the decline button. Then I decided to answer. Mia? Mom's voice was sugary sweet, the tone she always used when she wanted something. How are you, sweetheart? What do you want, Mom? I asked, cutting straight to the point. She let out a dramatic sigh. Well, since you ask, your father and I are in a bit of a situation with the car payments. I felt a laugh building in my chest but held it back. Oh, yes, she said, pausing as if for effect. We thought Leah would help us, with her new position and all, but when we asked her, she refused. Can you believe it? Said she had her own expenses to deal with. After everything we've done for her. The irony was almost too much. We were hoping, she continued, her voice quieter now, that maybe you could start helping with the payments again. Just until we figure something else out. This time, I couldn't stop the laugh. It came out sharp and bitter. Mia, this isn't funny, Mom snapped. We could lose the car. You know what's funny, Mom? I said, my voice steady. 4 months ago, I was being wheeled into emergency surgery and you called my son, your grandson, a burden. You couldn't even bother to help us because you were too busy celebrating Leah's promotion. And now the same Leah won't give you a dime. We were just busy that day, she stammered. You know how these events are.
No, Mom.
I know exactly what it was. I was useful. When I was paying your bills, Tony and I mattered. But the moment you thought Leah could replace me as your personal ATM, we became inconvenient again. That's not fair. We've always what? I cut her off. Always favored Leah? Always treated me like I was second best? Always took my help for granted until something better came along. Mia, please. You called my financial help handouts, remember? Right before you hung up on me when I was in the hospital. Well, guess what? The handouts are over. I'm done trying to buy your love. I'm done watching you treat my son like he's less important than Leah's designer handbags. I'm just done. But the car... I laughed again, this time lighter, almost free. Not my problem anymore. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up and blocked her number. Then I blocked Dad's too. Through the open window, I could hear Tony giggling in the backyard as he played with Kate and Sam. That sound, real laughter, real love, real family, made my decision feel right. The calls started coming in waves after that. First from Mom's phone, then Dad's. When I didn't answer, their voicemails ranged from tearful begging to angry demands. The text messages were just as bad. Mia, please, we're your parents. This is so selfish of you. We'll lose the car because of you. Each message only confirmed I'd made the right choice. Not one of them mentioned Tony. Not one showed regret for how they had treated us. It was all about them, their needs, their car, their feelings. After a week of this, I'd had enough. I blocked their numbers completely, set up email filters to send their messages straight to the trash, and finally felt like I could breathe again. You okay? Kate asked one Thursday afternoon as we sat in her parents' backyard, watching Tony and Sam chase each other. Nick was flipping burgers at the grill, and Miriam was setting the patio table for our weekly family dinner. You know what? I really am, I said, taking the lemonade she handed me. I keep waiting to feel guilty or sad, but mostly, I just feel free. You gave them more chances than they deserved, she said, giving my hand a squeeze. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away. Mommy, look what Grandpa Nick taught me. Tony came running over, showing off a new frisbee trick. I watched as Nick left the grill to help Tony perfect his throw, while Miriam cheered from the patio. This was what family should be, people who show up, not just for the good times, but for the hard moments, the hospital runs, and the school pickups too. These days, I don't know if my parents still have their car, or if Leah finally stepped up to help them. And, honestly, I don't care. I don't know if my parents are still throwing fancy parties or complaining about their ungrateful eldest daughter. I don't check their social media, don't ask mutual friends about them, and don't drive by their house when I'm nearby. What I do know is this. Tony has never asked about them since that day. Kids are smart, they can tell who really loves them. He has grandparents who never miss his school plays, an aunt who builds blanket forts with him, and a mom who finally learned that love doesn't come with strings attached. Last week, Tony brought home a family tree project from school. He had drawn Nick and Miriam right next to me, with Kate and Sam nearby. His dad had a small branch of his own. We've kept things polite with video calls and holiday visits. But my parents and Leah weren't on the paper at all. Is this okay, Mommy? He asked, showing me his drawing. Miss Dave said family trees usually have more people, but I told her these are the only ones we need. I smiled and hung his drawing on the fridge, right next to a photo from his last birthday party. All of us gathered around the cake, with real, happy smiles on every face. It's perfect, baby, I told him. Absolutely perfect. Sometimes, the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to have. Sometimes, you have to let go of the people who should have loved you to make space for the ones who truly do. It took me 33 years to learn that lesson, but watching Tony grow up surrounded by real, unconditional love, I'd say it was worth the wait.